Mic test. Ayan.
So, hello, ladies, gents, and non binary friends, and welcome to another episode of Omilia, an educational and philosophical discussion brought to you by the Philosophical Society of UPLB. Now, if you don't know who we are yet, and this is your first time getting to know us, you can check us out on all of our social media accounts. On Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram, our handle is at PhilosocUPLB. On YouTube, you can find us at Philosoc Space UPLB. And on Twitter, we are at PhilosocLB. I'm sorry, is there somebody who's unmuted? I'm getting a lot of feedback. Uh, okay. So sorry about that technical difficulty. It seems that somebody had some feedback coming from them. So to continue, tonight's Omilia episode is particularly special because we have partnered up with some great organizations, namely Gabriela Youth, UPLB, and PUP Soquetas Philosophy, whom we will get to know a little better later. For those of you who are joining us for the first time ever, Omilia is a traditional Philosoph event that is usually held on campus in Los Baños. But since there's a pandemic going on, and of course, we're not going to let that get in the way of us learning and philosophizing and having some healthy discourse, we've shifted our event to the digital world. Omilia is a two-part event consisting of an educational discussion, usually done by remarkably intellectual speakers, such as our speaker tonight, whom I'm very excited to introduce to all of you, and a subsequent philosophical discussion about everything we just learned. Of course, since we want to make sure this event runs smoothly and is a pleasant experience for everybody involved, Philosoc has devised some simple rules to ensure a smooth discussion takes place. It's simple. If you wish to speak, simply click the raise hand button in Zoom, and our tech team will add you to the speakers list. If you're uncomfortable with speaking out loud, you can always chat your response, and I'd be happy to read it out loud for you. Everyone also please remember to be charitable and kind to one another. Omilia was designed to be a safe space for all to learn to the best of their abilities. Lastly, all questions are welcome. Even if it feels silly, even if the answer seems obvious to other people but it's not obvious to you, it's okay to ask. So just ask away. Omilia is a no judgment zone. So that's it for the rules. Now comes the exciting part. What exactly will we be talking about? And who will be enlightening us about our said topic? Professor Chris Amarga Taganas teaches philosophy at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy in the same university. She recently finished her Master of Arts in Philosophy at UP Diliman. She was also the recipient of the International Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi University of the Philippines chapter official membership in recognition of her graduate academic record. Her main area of research is on feminist philosophy and feminist pragmatism, but sociopolitical philosophy and gender studies are also her areas of interest. Her master's thesis, which focused on feminist pragmatism emancipatory potential, I'm so sorry, was presented and very well received at a conference on women philosophers held at Universitat Paderborn, Germany last year. Wow. She is currently working on an existing project with the scholars from the same university. She has also been invited to present her research and joined the Scholars Circle of Contemporary Feminist Philosophers in New York last November. Her present researches reflect her commitment to make use of philosophy as a tool to immensely contribute to present discourses and to be of service to the people. She has delivered lectures and talks in forums and seminars, and also presented papers in various local and international conferences in philosophy. She teaches feminist philosophy, ethics, contemporary philosophy, and socio political philosophy. We believe in the value of discourse when it comes to clarifying various ideas in relation to a specific concept. This time, the idea of rape culture, which circulated in various media platforms for the past few weeks, calls for an enlightening discussion. The definition of rape culture, reasons behind victim blaming in cases of rape, the power of language, and the role of feminist philosophy, I'm so sorry, is addressing this issue are some areas of concern that we can talk about. While we crave for knowledge about this very interesting topic, let us all contemplate and allow the conversation to shed light to unclear and blurry ideas in mind. Our yearning for knowledge and enlightenment indeed paves the way to excellence, and this is what we aim for in this discussion. Please welcome our guest speaker, Professor Krisa Marga Taganas.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, po, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, good evening. It's nice to meet all of you. I can see a lot of unfamiliar faces and names. So, from UPLB ba tayong lahat tonight? Or meron from other institutions, organizations?
I think, ma'am, meron po from other institutions by invitation from the members.
Oh, okay. Okay, so not all of us here are fellow majors. Tama. Yeah, okay. Um, okay, so can I enabled na ba yung screen, yung share screen ko dito? Wait.
We already enabled it for you po, ma'am. We made you co-host, so now you can share your screen po.
Alright, okay. Sige, wait lang. Okay. So, okay na ba? Kita niyo ba yung screen ko? Yeah?
Opo, kita po yung screen niyo, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Alright, so before we start, my students know this, no? I always ask them first. So, in attending this very relevant, no, and very educational discussion tonight, what do you aim to learn tonight? Bakit kayo nag-spend time, no, to attend, no, to sit for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, to listen and to partake in the discussions that we'll have tonight? Can I hear some uh, answers from our audience? What do you aim to learn tonight? Ano bang gusto ninyong malaman ngayon? Meron na ba kayong background sa feminist philosophy? Okay. So of course, no, meron akong mga former students dito ng FemPhilo. So of course, we already assume, no, that you already have an in-depth, no, if not basic idea of what feminist philosophy is. But for the others, no, so para lang leveling tayo ng expectations and ma-tailor ko kung paano natin i-introduce yung mga konseptong ganito, no, especially that hindi naman pala lahat ay from the philosophy discipline. Can I hear some answers? Or magtatawag ako?
Ma'am, I think I have an answer po.
Okay.
I think for me, other than that I'm a member of the organization, so I'm one of the organizers, I do really value tonight's topic because it hits very close to home. And I consider myself a feminist, but I've never taken fem philo. So it's mainly because I want to become a better feminist so that I can contribute to the movement better po. Yun lang
Okay.
po.
Okay, thank you. How about the others? Thank you. What's your name again? Sorry.
Teddy po.
Teddy. Thank you, Teddy. How about the others? Yeah. Ryan. Hello, Ryan. Sige, you can talk. Hello,
Hello po.
Ryan.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Sorry po. Actually, I'm a philosophy student din po, incoming third years philosophy student sa
Okay.
UPLP. And actually, I work in a paper po before about sa feminist philosophy and how can men or paano po magiging feminist ang mga, let's say, na heterosexual men. Kasi I don't really quite understand po if men can really be labeled as feminist kahit men po
Okay.
kami, and or
Mhm.
can we be labeled as only as allies of feminism. Ayun po, kaya I'm interested po tonight para maliwanagan po about this.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, meron pa? How about yung mga non-philo majors? Is it the first time you're encountering feminist philosophy or feminism as a subject or as a concept? Or you only had a very basic idea of it? You still want to know more? Meron ba from other or from a non-philo major?
Hi.
Hi. Hello. Is it just me or your signal is breaking up?
Opo, ma'am, it's really choppy. Dominique, maybe you can just chat your answer and then I can read it out loud for you since my connection is a bit more stable. Oh, ma'am, do you mind if I read out some of the responses in the chat box po?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Hindi ko na makita kasi...
Opo.
Okay.
So sabi po ni
Sige.
Bianca, she wants to know the root cause of rape culture. And sabi po ni,
Oh.
walang name, but there's an email, DM A. Marillo, that they want to know why it exists, how it came to existence, and how we can stop it or empower those who experience it. Gail Magno says, how to engage family members in this kind of discussion. Whoa.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, very pressing and very important questions, no? And concerns. No? Okay.
Opo,
So,
ma'am.
yeah, thank you everyone for your answers. So, okay, let's now start with my presentation. All right. So, we'll be talking about rape culture, okay, and feminist philosophy tonight. So, again, I'm Marga from Philosophy Division from UPLB. So, okay, so to give you some outline, of what I'll be discussing for tonight, okay, so it's divided into three parts. Okay, so the first one is feminist philosophy. What is feminist philosophy? What are its commitments? What are its characterizations? Okay. It is very important, to learn and to look at feminist philosophy first as a program within philosophy in order to address, the issue that we'll be tackling, and to approach this with the concepts of feminist philosophy and methods in mind. The second part will be about, of course, rape as a social and political phenomenon. So it's an issue. So in this sense, we'll be talking about rape as a philosophical problem. So we'll also be looking into the feminist perspectives of rape. Okay, so we'll be discussing two dominant perspectives about rape: the liberal and the radical views, or from the liberal and radical feminism. The second is the ethical wrong or harm of rape. Okay, so in this sense, what is really wrong with rape? What makes rape wrong? Okay, so we'll be looking into the ethical ramifications and implications. In determining, pointing out the harm, okay, or the wrong in rape. What makes it morally injurious? What makes it wrong in the first place? Okay, and the third one is the politics of speaking out. Okay, so this is more on the emphasis on the personal narratives, personal stories that we share, that we hear, okay, from the people who experience it, the people who survived it. Okay, so how should we approach these stories? Okay, lastly, in this section, we'll be talking about epistemic injustice. No, so if you're a philosophy major, of course, no, you are familiar with the notion of the concept of epistemic injustice. So it has to do with epistemology, with knowledge, with us, the agents, as knowers. Okay, so in this sense, why should we investigate epistemic injustice? How does it contribute? Okay, bakit nagiging importanteng tool siya to understand these narratives? Okay, and of course, lastly, okay, what would be the role of feminist philosophy in addressing these issues? Okay, what are the possibilities? Okay, of that it offers? Okay, in understanding or in further and deep understanding of the issue of rape and sexual violence. All right. So, well, generally, no, rape and sexual violence are actually topics that are very sensitive and difficult, okay, even for philosophers, no? Specifically, of course, for feminist philosophers. That's why in the very limited time that I have, okay, I hope to succinctly explain and convey the important issues, the important concerns, okay, and the important questions that we can address, that we can examine, no, in looking at the phenomenon, the issue of rape as a philosophical problem. Okay, so, oops, just a minute. All right, so let's move on to the concept or the uh, sub-discipline in philosophy, which is the feminist philosophy. This will be our backdrop, no, in arguing for um, uh, the different concerns, the methods, okay, and the inquiries that we'll be having, okay, in investigating rape. Okay, so in feminist philosophy, so um, for those of you who are not familiar with feminist philosophy, okay, so this is actually so in view, no, it is a response, okay, it is the response of the feminists, okay, particularly, of course, women in philosophy, a response to the masculinist, okay, and the androcentric thinking, which is prevalent in philosophy. Okay? So it's also like any other discipline, tulad din ng iba't ibang mga disiplina, tulad ng science, psychology, etc. Okay? So prevalent din doon, no, yung masculinist and androcentric thinking, particularly because they were dominated by male thinkers. No? So, okay, so it arose in the early 1970s. So kung titignan natin, comparing from other disciplines in philosophy, it's actually very young. Okay, and at the same time, it already has, no, an established. It is already established, no, in philosophy. So it can be treated or can be looked at as a research program and a sub-discipline within philosophy. Okay, so philosophy, of course, has become a very vital arena for feminists. Okay, in looking into investigating different issues of women. Okay, so in this sense, makikita natin that philosophy has been providing methods, okay, critiques and analysis, okay, that are very important to the feminism movement. Okay, so all the more, no, that it emphasizes the self-consciousness. So merong greater self-consciousness about precisely the marriage or the confluence or the relationship between feminism and philosophy as disciplines. Okay, so it's characterized by two goals. So meron tayong dalawang goals na i-determine dito. Goals of feminist philosophy: the first is practical and the second is theoretical. So on a practical level, feminist philosophers engage in a thorough investigation of the biases in the philosophical canon. And they seek ways to correct or counter these biases. Okay, so ang unang-unang step is hanapin natin yung sources, No, hanapin natin yung biases na to, and we have to find a way to correct or counter these biases. Second is, they articulate their experiences and critique actions that perpetuate women's subordination. Okay? So hindi natatapos na nakita natin yung ugat, punot, dulo, o yung mga biases na to. Kailangan natin silang i-correct, kailangan natin silang i-counter, at kailangan natin gamitin yung mga experiences natin bilang mga babae. Okay? At i-critique, no, at the same time, i-critique yung mga actions that all the more perpetuate women's oppression or subordination. Lastly, they prescribe and envision ways to truly emancipate women and transform the society. So of course, nandoon yung goal that we are doing this because we want to improve the condition of women. We want to emancipate women from the chains or from oppression sa society. Okay, so the next one is for the theoretical level, or on a theoretical level, feminist philosophers explore concepts significant to women, such as birth, sex, gender, and sexuality. And lastly, to offer new ways of approaching and articulating feminist issues through philosophical theories and methods. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? We can see here that there's a marriage of theory and practice. Hindi natatapos na we are looking at the concepts, that we are changing, no, the focus, changing the issues, no, that we are looking into issues na hindi naman natatakal before sa philosophy, like birth, like sex, and gender, and sexuality. And before, ang mga nagtatakal lang naman ng mga issues na to ay ang mga kalalakihan. Okay? Nandoon din, of course, yung emphasis on the practice. Okay? That which is, of course, it emphasizes on the conscious effort. Okay, so theoretical, we'll be looking into these concepts. Gagamitin natin silang mga tools to further achieve our practical goals, which is, of course, to have to commit the conscious effort to change the system, to change the society. Okay? So laging dalawa, laging twofold, no, ang feminist philosophy. Okay? We look at the theoretical on a theoretical level, and then lagi meron lagi tayong conscious effort to change it. Okay? We recognize there's women's subordination, merong oppression na nagaganap. This is very basic. If you are a feminist, this is very basic that there exists no women's subordination. And then doon yung commitment to change it. Commitment to change what is wrong with the society or the system. All right. So in short, no, feminist philosophy as a research program is actually an application of philosophical methods and approaches to feminist concerns, okay, or women's issues and concerns. Okay, so to further identify ano pang tenets of feminist philosophy, of course, they tried to develop new methods of analysis and critique, defined new lines of inquiry, and they reinvigorated some of the central areas of philosophy. Okay, so they introduced new ways of thinking. Dahil bago yung pananaw, dahil ngayon ay pananaw ito at experience, danas ng mga kababaihan na talaga naman nakararanas ng mga issue na iyon, nag-give birth siya sa mga bagong methods, mga bagong questions that will further illuminate on how we should address these issues. Okay? So now that we already have these ideas and concepts about the goals or what is feminist philosophy, now we proceed to rape, okay, as a philosophical problem. Okay, so now let's talk about how do feminist philosophers approach the issues of rape and sexual violence. All right. Okay. So we have here on definitions. Okay. So actually defining rape, has been a continuous and a persistent problem, in both legal and philosophical thought. But of course, my lecture wouldn't touch extensively on the legal aspect, but just more on the conceptual and methodological tools. Okay, but there was a wide agreement, widely agreed naman, okay, among philosophers that rape is a social problem and that it is a political issue. So merong evolution, throughout the years. kung paano natin dinidefine ano ba talaga yung rape. And ito yung mga usual, no? Some definitions of rape over time. And kung mapapansin natin, ito yung mga common, no? Yung parang common ideas, okay, or the common thoughts that we have about rape. So the first is that there is an imposition of intercourse by force. Okay, so lagi napaka-importante nung term na force dyan. Okay, at some point, they also defined rape as an unlawful sexual intercourse with a female person without her consent. Okay, very specific na nakalagay it should be female. Okay, and it's unlawful sexual intercourse and the emphasis on consent. Okay, so not meaning, pag walang consent, this is non-consensual sex. Next is intercourse with force and without consent. Okay, so actually ito yung very dominant, no, na definition of rape that is being used, no, in the legal system, or even used by philosophers, no, in tackling this very issue. So kung titignan natin yung law natin in the Philippines, so to contextualize lang, okay, so aside from the criterion, okay, of actual or threatened force, abuse of authority, okay, kung mapapatunayan talaga natin na merong or na-threaten, okay, yung individual, or meron talagang abuse and force, okay. Another is that this is considered as sexual assault by inserting his penis into another person's mouth, okay, or anal, okay, or any instrument, okay, into one's genitals, okay. So mas specific siya. Actually, in some other laws, no, ang kanilang definition of rape, okay, or ang pinaka ginagamit nila is that there must be penetration, okay. So there must be a vaginal penetration by the penis, okay. So it's very interesting actually, no, kapag titignan natin yung mga iba't ibang interpretations, iba't ibang definitions that we use, okay, tungkol sa rape. Okay, so it's also unique in a sense that at some point it is considered a sex crime. Okay, it's a sex crime that is not regarded as a crime when it looks like sex. Okay, so that is a very widely known view. Okay, that well, if it looks like sex, then it is not rape. Okay, so kaya maraming critiques, no, there's lots of criticisms, okay, na nakafocus dun sa specifically on the legal system, that the legal system actually sees intercourse in rape, okay? But the victims, the survivors, see rape in intercourse, okay? So to add pa on this complexity, okay, yung complexity ng issue of definitions, there's this idea, no, that rape daw is usually done by strangers. Okay? So, bakit nag-add sa complexity? Dahil daw, rape is only done by strangers or someone else. Someone unknown. Okay? Doon sa individual. But, in reality, majority or a lot of rapes, okay, they happen, or they were done by someone close to us, someone we know, someone we trusted, someone we have mutuality, no, being shared. So even relative, our bosses, our friends, etc. No? So this adds more, no, doon sa trauma of the individual who experienced this act. Okay, so yun madalas, no, hindi natitake into account, no, in defining rape. Lastly, of course, no, meron ding definition that is more anchored doon sa evidence. Okay, so there must be force. Okay, so sa mga ganitong issues, dapat maipakita mo na merong force na nangyari, na merong resistance on the part of the victim. Dapat nag-resist ka. Okay, dapat maipakita mo, ma-prove mo na nag-resist ka. Ma-prove mo na merong force na ginamit on you. Okay? And in that sense, no, if you can prove it in court, then it's not rape. Okay? So ito yung mga definitions, okay, na gamit in the legal system or even in other fields, no, tackling the issue of rape and sexual violence. Okay, so now let's look at the feminist perspective. So I'll be presenting here to you two views. Okay, so from the strands of feminism, liberal and radical. Okay, so ano bang pagtingin ng mga feminists? So ito yung dalawang dominant na view sa debate ng rape in philosophy. Okay, so let's look at the liberal view first. So the liberal view is actually exemplified by one of the feminists, okay, Susan Brown Miller, very influential feminist at her time, during her time. So yung liberal view states that rape is violence, not sex. Okay? So the motivations behind an act of rape are not primarily sexual, but violent. Okay? So tinatry niyang i-distinguish between two concepts. Ang rape daw, hindi siya sex. It is violence. It is an act of violence. So rape here acts as a power that sought to dominate and degrade the victim. So it's not that ang habol niya is the drive or yung sexual pleasure, but that you are being violent kasi it is a form, it is a show, okay, a demonstration of power over the victim. Okay? So in that sense, bakit liberal yung conception nito? Okay? At under siya sa liberal feminist thought, it's because assault siya on individual autonomy. Okay, so if you're familiar with liberal feminism, okay, ang root para sa kanila ng women's oppression is the inequality, okay, of the sexes. Okay, so we have to make the game fair. So kailangan maging fair lahat para ma-achieve nating lahat yung equality. So you also give us the same opportunities that you are enjoying as male, okay, in this patriarchal society. So in that sense, yung individual autonomy, okay, yung nava-violate, okay, and it is considered as an assault to your individual autonomy. So nag-i-infringe siya sa basic and fundamental right mo sa katawan mo. Okay, so it also emphasizes yung bodily integrity mo, yung right to your bodily integrity. Okay, at of course, ini-imply ng rights na ito yung consent mo. Okay, so papasok na dito, very important concept. Okay, lalo pag naririnig natin yung rape, lagi nandito itong term na to, which is consent. Okay, so your right expresses your consent. Okay, and the liberalists, okay, feminist liberals would argue that dapat yung consent freely given yon. Okay, dapat actively given siya. Okay, dapat talagang categorically na umuo, categorically na nagsabi na gusto niya yung ginagawa niya. Pero napaka-vague, napaka-komplikado, okay, ng consent, no, bilang isang konsepto. So, nagiging standard, no, yung consent. Okay, kung nangyari ba yung rape or hindi. So kapag nag-consent ka, okay, ibig sabihin hindi yun rape. Pag hindi ka nag-consent, yun ay rape. Pero what is problematic with that kind of view? Okay? Kasi ang consent, it can be seen in a lot of forms. Okay? Bakit? Meron tayong pressured consent. Okay? Meron tayong coerced consent, which actually ay hindi talaga ng mga consent, no? Pwede siyang maging in a form ng offer, pwede siyang maging form ng threat. So in that sense, sabihin, isusumbong kita kay ganito pag sinabi mo to, papatayin ko si ganito pag sinabi mo to, or pag ginawa mo to. So in that sense, mapipilitan ka na umuo kasi nabigyan ka ng offer, or threaten ka ng assailant mo. Okay? So why is it problematic? Kasi yung definition natin of rape as violence and not sex, it just lumps the issue among other types of assaults. Kaya ini-ignore niya yung sexual nature ng act. Okay? So ang sinasabi lang natin is assault siya, violence lang siya. So makikita natin dyan na essentially parang pagbubugbog lang din siya, parang battery lang din siya. No? So hindi na-recognize yung nature, yung sexual nature at na-involve doon sa act of rape. Okay? So, dinidistinguish niya yung violence and sex. Which, of course, no, ayon sa mga critics, sa isang male-dominated, sa isang patriarchal society, okay, sa isang patriarchal society, mahihirapan tayong i-distinguish ang violence at sex. Okay? It's very impossible, okay, to distinguish sex and violence under male dominance. Okay? Why? Yung consent na lang mismo, okay, the consent na lang itself as a concept or as an important a concept here is very unstable siya. No? Maraming factors. It has to be context specific. Umuo ka kasi trinetin ka, umuo ka kasi binigyan ka ng offer. And that wouldn't translate to your full consent. O nag-consent ka talaga dun sa act. Okay? So, consent here becomes irrelevant. Why? In a society like ours, in a patriarchal society like ours, hindi naman natin hawak yung sexualidad natin bilang mga babae. It has been always the case that the patriarchy or the society has been dictating to us, okay, kung ano ba yung rightful sa atin at hindi. No? Even our sexuality as women, under-examined, under-explored, okay, because of our historical oppression. Okay? So, nagiging irrelevant, no? Hindi stable na concept ang consent in this view, okay? Because it ignores the fact that women's sexuality is actually shaped by patriarchy, okay? So, the next one is a radical view, okay? So, ito naman exemplified ng isang very, very famous feminist philosopher, Catherine McKinnon. So, para sa mga radical feminists, they're not saying that it's not about individual autonomy, no? It's not about issue ng infringement of my basic right to bodily autonomy. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. Okay? They propose the idea that rape is the epitome of the inequality of men and women and the degradation and oppression of women by men. It is an act of terrorism and torture. Okay? So they claim that it is a pillar of patriarchy. Okay? So sinasabi dito ni McKinnon that nakikita kasi natin na ang ginagawa or ang dominant is yung sexuality, nagiging compulsory yung nature ng heterosexuality at na-eroticize yung male dominance. Okay? So, ang reaction ni McKinnon sa mga liberal feminists would be, well, if it's just violence, if rape is just violence and not about sex, then why didn't he just hit her? Okay, so bumabalik tayo dun sa criticism kanina, yung problem kanina na malalamp natin siya doon sa issue ng mga iba't ibang klase ng mga assaults. Okay, na hindi nare-recognize yung pagiging sexual mismo nung nature ng act of rape. Okay, so another problem here sa radical view is that masyadong nakikita or masyadong na-emphasize yung male dominance, na okay, pillar siya ng patriarchy, okay, terrorism siya, it is an act of torture to women, epitome siya ng inequality. Pero mas hindi ganoon nabibigyan ng room, yung sexual agency mismo ng mga babae. Okay? So hinihikayat na magkaroon pa sana tayo ng room para ma-recognize na okay, women are victims of this society, and thus we also have to recognize na tayo ay parte din ng society na to, albeit of course very secondary lang, secondary members lang of the society. The other, okay, as per de Beauvoir, it provides space to recognize that kahit merong male dominance, kahit kontrolado ng patriarchal na society ang sexuality ng mga babae, there is always room for resistance. Okay? That there is always room for sexual agency. Okay? So nonetheless, okay, so I think we already discussed yung criticisms kanina ng each. So nonetheless, feminists see or agree that rape and sexual violence, okay, ito ay mga expression of the patriarchal order that is maintained, reinforced, okay, on women and other marginalized groups, okay, to maintain their subordination, to maintain their inferior social location. Okay, now let's proceed to the ethical wrong of rape. Okay, so madaling argue, yes, rape is wrong. Rape is morally injurious. Okay? Widely accepted din naman yung view na yon, no? That we all agree that rape is wrong. Pero what is this wrong in rape? How can we pinpoint the exact harm of rape? Okay? So in this sense, okay, there is a considerable debate, okay, on what constitutes the wrong or the harm on rape. Okay, so I'll just give you two. So marami, no? Maraming iba't ibang views. Ano ba yung wrong sa rape? Ano ba yung harm na ibinibigay talaga ng rape? Okay, so I'll just present you with the two traditional views, no? So the first one, ito reminiscent to reflective to ng liberal feminist view, okay, on rape, which emphasizes on our right of consent. Okay, so essentially, rape is wrong because it undermines the integrity of personhood of the victim by denying their right of consent over the property that is most personally and most intensely held, which is the body. Okay? So, na-emphasize yung bodily autonomy and bodily integrity na naman natin dito. Okay? So, the autonomy to one's body, of course, it expresses our right to consent, okay, para sa ating lived body, okay, doon sa bodily integrity natin. Okay, so ganun din, no, reflective siya ng liberal feminist thought. Okay. The second view is that rape is both a political phenomenon and an individual experience, okay, ng isang embodied subject. So the wrongs of rape have everything to do with the socially constituted body and everything to do with the sexual difference and sexual politics. Okay, so dito ini-emphasize yung sexual nature of the act of rape. So hindi na lang tayo nakukulong doon sa pag-pinpoint na na-emphasize yung pleasure, yung drive, etc. But we are already seeing, okay, na the wrongs of rape lies doon sa pagiging sexual nung nature nung act of rape. Okay? So if you are also familiar, no, with Kant's categorical imperative, isa rin to sa mga tinitignan natin bilang suporta doon sa ethical wrong of rape. In his categorical imperative, very Kantian yung idea that you shouldn't use someone, okay, as a means to an end. No? So ginagamit lang natin siyang instrument. Okay? Isa rin yun, okay, na mas nagpapayabong pa ng argument ng objectification. Ino-objectify, ginagawa tayong object. Okay? Na imbes na tayo ay dapat subjects, okay, ginagawa tayong objects. Okay? So ito yung dalawang traditional na view, okay, na ano ba yung wrong sa act of rape. Okay? So I'll also present you, okay, so far there's one feminist philosopher na who combined, no, the different arguments, okay, concerning the ethical wrong on rape, okay, and very inclusive, I would like to believe, or if I may use the word, no, very inclusive, and at the same time na elaborate, na develop yung konsepto. Okay, so we'll be using Linda Alcoff's sexual subjectivity. So para kay Linda Alcoff, okay, the most central harm, okay, the wrong of rape lies in our sexual subjectivity. Okay, ano ba yung sexual subjectivity natin? Okay, so our sexual subjectivity entails a persistent focus not only on our desires, preferences, but the sexual subject's agency. So meron tayong focus sa agency natin. Okay? Agency natin bilang human beings. So itong agency na to includes our ability to forward one's own sexual becoming, to have significant and meaningful influence on kinds of sexual interactions that one engages with, and to participate in substantial way in meaning-making process of interpreting those interactions. So ano bang ibig sabihin nun, ma'am? So Alcoff is pinpointing that the harm on rape lies in its ability to inhibit, okay, the very possibility of sexual self-making. Okay? So ano bang ibig sabihin nun? Our sexuality comprise, no, a very huge chunk of our identity, of who we are. Okay, and we also recognize that our experiences are shaped, di ba, yung mga experiences natin are shaped by different social political discourses, Okay? And thus, in turn, or consequently, okay, nasi-shape din tayo ng mga experiences na yon. Na yung mga experiences na yon ay shape naman ng mga iba't ibang socio-political and historical na mga context and discourses. So in that sense, nava-violate ng rape mismo, okay, yung ating yung possibility ng sarili natin, okay, of sexual making. Okay? That the trauma na naibibigay ng act of rape sa mga victims and survivors, it atrophies possibilities. Okay? So the rape always gets in the way. You cannot participate in a very wholesome or a very neutral, siguro a very healthy discourse, for example, about sexuality, because your experience gets in your way, because your trauma gets in your way, your anxiety gets in your way of making sense of your experiences and making sense of other people's experiences. Okay? So it violates the very practical activity natin bilang mga human beings, and that is to care for ourselves. Okay? So we constantly experience paranoia, safety concerns, yung paglalakad lang sa pool ng mga, for example, mga kalalakihan, it fears us, no? It gives us fear. We fear for our lives, no? We fear that we're being judged by the way we dress, okay, the way we drink, okay, sino bang mga kasama natin, etc. Okay? So it inhibits us, no? Pinuputol nung act of rape yung possibility natin of sexual self-making, to practically care for ourselves. Okay? So makikita natin dito na malaking-malaki yung nako-constitute ng sexualidad natin bilang mga tao doon sa binubuo nating sarili natin. Okay? It is as if something that we can isolate, no? Na halimbawa, okay, nangyari sa iyo ito. And then okay, sige, i-compartmentalize lang natin siya, i-isolate lang natin yung experience na yan sa buhay ko, and then I can go on with my life. It's not as simple as that, and it doesn't work like that. Why? Because this is not something that can be isolated from our existential situation. Lagit-laging kasama yun on how we make sense of our experiences, on how we practically care for ourselves. And of course, no, towards flourishing. Okay? So, yun yung pinaka ethical wrong or harm, okay, on our sexual subjectivity. Okay? So in this sense, no matter when it happens in one's life, one's sexual life is changed or is forever changed. Okay? So actually, the younger, okay, the earlier na nangyari yon sa buhay ng isang tao, okay, harder it gets, okay, to make sense of this and to come to terms with this experience. Okay? So once it happens, one's sexual life is forever changed. Okay. So now, what can we do? All right. So ito, na-cover na natin yung theoretical aspect, theoretical goal. Okay, na-pinpoint na natin ano ba yung mga konsepto na importante in explaining the phenomenon, the issue of rape and sexual violence. Now, what can we do? Okay, what is our conscious effort to change this system? What should we change, no? And how can we change it? Of course, makikita natin yun. At isa ito, no? The politics of speaking out. Okay, so now in forwarding a feminist insight, okay, on this issue, engage na natin yung sarili natin sa level ng we commit ourselves, okay? We commit our efforts to change the system. Okay. So, okay, so of course, not to contextualize, because this is a very pressing issue, okay, apart from napakarami pang nangyayari, no, na ang dami pang ganap sa Pilipinas. Okay, so but to contextualize at para mas makita natin, okay, in the very in a closer context. Okay, so recently nag-trend yung hashtag iha ako. Okay, so in response to of course, no, mga issues and different concerns on rape, victim blaming, okay, issues ng sexual violence, etc. Okay, so ito yung sharing and telling of personal stories of trauma and violence, okay, of abuse, okay, ng mga naka-experience nito. It's more like a reboot din ng Me Too movement, okay, sa ibang bansa. Okay, but like yes, all women, napakarami no ng hashtag activism na tinatawag. And gladly no, very recently nag-trend itong Iha Ako, and a lot of brave individuals come forward with their stories of trauma, their stories of violence, and their first-hand experiences of sexual violence. Okay, so this is actually an evidence, no? It's a manifestation of how, in the Philippine context at least, no, how our legal system fails us. Okay, we can see mga posts nung even mga PNP, okay, mga tips nila to prevent rape, okay, that shifts the blame to the victims, that shifts the discourse, no, yung focus ng spotlight nasa victim, hindi doon sa mga perpetrators, etc. Okay, we can see how the legal system fails us, that we try to seek other ways, extra legal measures, no, para ma-address yung mga concerns natin na to. And we can do this through these kinds of movements. Okay, so makikita natin, no, that through this, na-expose yung mga perpetrators, na-name natin, no, we start to name, no, these people. We start to name the things that they have done to us. Okay, it's a very powerful thing. Okay, to name your perpetrators and to name the things that they have done to you. Okay, so we also expose the harmful practices that reinforce rape supportive attitudes. Okay, and later no, we'll expound more on these rape supportive attitudes. Okay, but often than not, okay, madalas ang nakikita lang natin is the very powerful side, the very positive side of empowerment. Okay, yes, it is empowering. Okay, pero nakakalimutan natin that this is actually a very dangerous memory work. Napaka-dangerous ng work ng recall. Okay, because we will be telling it once more, once again. Okay, our violent realities. Okay, more often than not, violent realities tong mga ito. And we make public our private suffering. It is not an easy task. And while others are now empowered to change the conversation, now that others are very empowered to share their stories and to stand up for their experiences and for other people, of course, a lot of people are still not courageous enough to come forward with their stories. Okay, it's not an easy task because it is actually a very dangerous task. Okay, that it's like relieving. Okay, you relieve the memory. But in our struggle for change in the system, kailangan nating pagdaanan to legitimize women's voices and other individuals' voices in this issue. Really have to make our way in this struggle. Okay, so it makes our permanent harms as people, no, as individuals. It makes visible our deep cuts. Okay, it makes visible our cuts. Okay, that's why mahirap pa rin para sa ibang tao na i-share yung experiences nila. Okay, so sabi nga nila, no, a lot of testimonies, no, of victims usually, they're saying that, well, the legal system always fails us in the sense that rape is not actually prohibited, no, rape is regulated, no, rape is only regulated. Okay, samahan pa nito ng mga iba't ibang rape supportive attitudes, talagang nai-invalidate yung mga narratives, yung mga personal stories na to of trauma, of violence, and these violent realities and experiences. And that women are actually raped twice, no? The second time in court. Okay, and sadly, in this sense, the second time through social media. Okay, so one thing, okay, that in all what patriarchy can control, or in everything that the patriarchal society can control, there is one thing that they cannot. There is one thing that the patriarchal society, norms, values, traditions, and institutions cannot control. And that is the meaning of the sexual encounter, of the act to the person, okay, to the victim, to the survivor. That is something that they cannot change. That is something that they cannot alter. Okay? Yung meaning nito sa mga naka-experience nun. At yun yung gagamitin nating punto, location para ipaglaban itong change na hinahanap natin sa sistema. Okay, so gagamitin natin tulad ng feminist research, importante ang danas experience, our personal experience, yung ating voice in embarking the research. So in this sense, yung experience ng survivor or ng victims, yung ating magiging point of departure. Okay? So we also have to acknowledge that these stories are not only hard to tell. Okay? These stories are very hard to hear, and all the more very hard to hear well. Okay? So now, makikita natin, sorry. Okay, makikita natin dito ang definition ng rape culture. So in all these things, okay? And so, paano ba nare-receive, no? So for the last few weeks, paano ba tinanggap ng social media, ng Filipino society, yung mga narratives na meron tayo from the Iya Ako movement. So of course, it's undeniable na nandoon yung stereotypes, nandoon yung myths, nandoon yung mga rape supportive attitudes. What are these rape supportive attitudes? Okay? Yung nasi-shift yung blame sa victim. Ano ba kasing sinuot mo nun? No? So kung gaano ka-ikli yung suot mo, ganoon yung level or yung rapeability mo, no? Kasi ang akli ng shorts mo eh, no? So it seems as though that they're saying that, well, you deserve it. Kasi in the very first place, you elicited it, you precipitated, no, yung nangyari. Okay? Ano pang mga rape supportive attitudes? Sino bang kasama mo nung time na yun? No, na-rape ka kasi you were at the wrong place at the wrong you are at a wrong place, okay, at a wrong time. Who are you with? Gaano ba kadami yung ininom mo that time? And sadly, that determines your rapeability, okay, as an individual. What else? Well, kasama rito, yung catcalling. Well, catcalling, it should be flattery for women, no, to call you babe, to call you hi sexy, no, it should flatter you because we were looking at you, no, because we were noticing you, etc. It involves rape jokes, okay? It involves the narrative that, boys will be boys, no, talagang evolutionary drive ito natural drive ito, sexual drive ito and it's natural. Okay? And furthermore, arguing that this is the natural order of things. Okay? So, lahat ng ito, okay, ay nagbibigay or nag-culminate doon sa rape culture. Okay? So, the complex of beliefs that encourages male sexual aggression at sinusuportahan niya yung violence against women. Okay, so in that sense, nakikita natin that the rape culture condones physical and emotional terrorism against women as the norm. Hindi na lang natin pinupuntuhan, hindi na lang natin tinitignan yung mga perpetrators. Siyempre kasama yun, pero we are looking at the practices. Okay, we are looking at the practices that reinforce, all the more perpetuate yung mga ganitong violent and yung mga violent na mga practices against women and other marginalized groups. Okay. So what kind of spaces, okay, are these testimonies and narratives are circulated and uttered? Okay? Anong klaseng spaces ba? Saan bang spaces sila nailahad? Okay? So in that sense, makikita natin na in the Philippine context, makikita natin na ito ay nasa rape culture na space. Okay? At sa rape culture na space na yon, nakikita natin yung failure of recognition. Okay? Hindi natin nire-recognize. So firstly, hindi nire-recognize mismo ng victim. Okay? That she is a victim. It doesn't recognize herself. Okay? She doesn't recognize herself. And at the same time, mayroong inability, okay, of the others, okay, the hearers in this sense, to recognize her as a victim. Okay? So now we proceed to epistemic injustice. Bakit importante itong conceptual tool na to? Okay, ano ba itong epistemic injustice na ito at bakit kailangan natin siya para mas makita natin at mas ma-investigate natin yung issue ng rape. Okay? So, in essence, epistemic injustice refers to the failure of recognition. Okay? Ito yung sinasabi na natin kanina. There is a denial, a willful denial of one's standing as a knower. Okay? So the hearers, okay, instead of survivors, are regarded as epistemic authorities. Okay? So halimbawa, sa mga ganitong cases, hindi natin ibinibigay, hindi natin ginagrant doon sa naka-experience na yun yung epistemic authority to talk about his or her experiences. Okay? To make sense of that person's experiences. Okay? Di ba sometimes pag may mga ganitong issue, lalo kapag na-sensationalize ng media, etc., meron parang interlocutor, meron parang, halimbawa, may ibang expert na mag-i-interpret pa lalo nung na-experience ng tao. It is as if we're there. No? It is as if these stories are there para i-interpret pa ng ibang tao. Okay? It is as if I am putting forth an epistemically raw material na parang hindi ko kayang mag-make sense ng sarili kong experiences. Okay? Kasi ang nagiging judge ay yung hearers. Okay? Hindi ikaw yung mismong authority, okay, nung mismong experience mo. Okay? So, itong epistemic injustice na to can lead to epistemic violence, which of course is yung silencing. Okay? So, systematically, we deny the epistemic authority sa mga taong yon to make sense of their experiences. So, meron tayong tinatawag na testimonial quieting and smothering. So, ito yung dalawang klase ng epistemic violence na pwedeng mag-occur sa mga ganitong testimonies. Una, okay, paano ba tayo nasa-silence pagdating dito sa mga ganitong issue? Una, merong quieting na tinatawag. The speaker is silenced due to the failure of the hearer to identify her as a knower. Maraming factors ito pwede na sabihin. Kasi naman, for example, prostitute naman siya. Ito naman yung profession niya. Ito naman yung ginagawa. Ito yung past niya. Okay? Maraming factors na pwedeng mag-contribute para sabihin or i-discredit nila yung epistemic authority mo bilang isang knower. Okay? So, sa ganito, okay, makikita natin na yung credibility mo as a knower is already undermined. Okay? So, nasa silence ka kasi hindi nire-recognize yung credibility mo sa experience mo. Okay? In that sense, syempre, magkakaroon ng non-belief. Okay? Hindi ka paniniwalaan ng mga tao. On the other hand, meron tayong testimonial smothering. Okay? Ito namang smothering na to, self-silencing na siya. Okay? Bakit? Kasi you are aware of the hearer's incompetence. Ano yung incompetence na yun? That kahit mag-testify ka ng victimization mo, it will only lead to future harm. So halimbawa, gusto mo sanang magkwento ng experience mo, for example, about your boss, about your friend, about sa violence na ginawa nila sa'yo, but you can't because ando dun yung risk na pwede kang matanggalan ng trabaho because ang involved ay yung boss mo, etc. Okay? So itong mga to, you are already silencing yourself. You're prohibiting yourself from speaking out, from speaking up because it would only lead to future harm. Okay? So ang result ng parehong to ay, of course, the person is unreliable. Okay? Pagdating doon sa source of knowledge, and that it is less likely to improve one's condition. Okay? So itong mga to, guys, no, napakalaki, very profound yung effects nito. Okay? Doon sa mga survivors and sa mga victims. That's why some are just left to cope on their own. You know, some of them are actually ostracized, no, ng kanilang mga pamilya, ng kanilang loved ones. Okay? Sila pa yung may kasalanan. Okay? And they're left to, you know, make sense of what they have, to make do of what they have, okay, in enduring these kinds of experiences. Okay. Now, ano ang may tutulong sa atin ng isang feminist philosophical analysis on rape? Okay, so this is going to be the last section of my presentation. All right. So, the feminist philosophical analysis, no, na na-afford natin, okay, with all these concepts, with all these considerations, makikita natin yung potential ng mga narratives, ng mga istorya natin to be politically transformative. Okay? So ito napaka-importante to. No, sinasabi ko nga lagi sa mga students ko, no, in feminist philosophy, you cannot be a feminist without engaging or without committing yourself to change. Hindi pwedeng nare-recognize mo lang na nag-i-exist yung oppression. Hindi pwedeng nare-recognize mo lang na oo, may bias. Oo, may oppression against women and other marginalized groups. Okay? Oo, nag-i-exist din yung rape sa mga lalaki at hindi lang sa mga babae. Okay? Kailangan nandoon din yung commitment mo to change. Okay? So yun yung napaka-importanting aspeto ng pagiging isang feminist. Okay? To commit yourself to change. Okay? So ito, napakalaki ng potential ng narratives and stories natin para i-transform yung society natin, i-transform yung culture natin. Okay? So, makikita natin dito, no, that we don't only need words, okay? We don't only need stories. We need an audience, okay? After all these examinations na ginawa natin, makikita natin na hindi lang natin kailangan ng mga words, hindi lang natin kailangan ng mga concepts. Ang kailangan natin, okay, we need an audience, okay? We need listeners, we need hearers that will listen to us, that will understand us, and that will take us seriously, okay? Because if not, nandito yung danger of internalizing rape culture. Okay? At kapag na-internalize natin yung rape culture, all the more na nagkakaroon ng failure of recognition. Okay? All the more na nagpe-prevent yung meaning making natin. Okay? All the more na nai-internalize doon sa victim that she or he is at fault. Nakagagawa niya yon. Okay? Nakasalanan na yon. That the person deserved it because of the way she or he dressed, because of the time na lumabas siya sa friends ng mga kasama niya, etc., etc. Okay? So, this feminist philosophical analysis now compels us to recognize the complexity of this phenomenon. Okay? Importante na i-recognize natin na we cannot just simplistically solve this. We cannot just simplistically argue that, okay, ito yung ethical wrong of rape. Okay? And in that sense, itong ethical wrong of rape na to, sorry, yung sumasabay yung aso. Medyo nagagalit rin yata siya. Okay, sorry. So, saan na nga ako? Okay, so in that sense, no, makikita natin that we need to recognize the complexity of this issue. Okay, yung complexity ng phenomenon na to, makikita natin dun sa mga previous discussion natin, intersection to ng feminism, philosophy, epistemology, kanina, ethics, ethical wrong of rape, speaking out, the politics of speaking out is politics. Okay? Of course, kasama rin dito yung legal, no? Yung legal system, yung legal theories. Okay? So makikita natin na intersectional, no, overlapping itong mga diskurso na to at hindi lang natin basta pwedeng i-argue na okay, hindi ako nag-consent and that is not and hindi ako nag-consent so that is not rape. We cannot just simplistically argue about these things. We need to recognize na very complex yung phenomenon na to. At sa pag-recognize natin na complex ang phenomenon na to, we have to take note, no, yung iba't ibang mga intersections, no, that albeit overlapping, okay, interlocking din sila. Okay, na kailangan natin tignan yung ethics, kailangan natin tignan yung politics nito, kailangan natin tignan yung legal aspect nito, okay, etc. So itong narratives na to, they are transformative because it gives us the possibility or it affords us the possibility na isipin na it is not an isolated phenomenon. Hindi ko personal na problema ito. It happens to everyone. It can happen to anyone. Okay? It can happen sa kakilala ko, sa hindi ko kilala, at sa kahit sino, mapababae man, okay, o lalaki, okay, o mapamember ka man ng isang marginalized group, etc. Okay? So ito ay more, it affirms, no? Itong mga narratives and personal stories na to all the more affirm that this is not a personal problem. This is not an isolated case or not an isolated incident. Okay? That it is a result of a product of a larger system of oppression. Okay? And here, we can now realize, no, that the personal is always political. No, napaka-importante sa feminist thought that the personal is political. Okay, so we can see here that at the same time na na-affirm natin, okay, napapakita natin yung vulnerability natin as epistemic and moral agents, okay, napapakita natin that this is not only a personal problem, that to make public my private suffering, it all the more, okay, provide a very strong foundation that it is a social phenomenon and that it is a product of a larger system of oppression. Okay, so okay, it is unique in itself. Okay, so sa pag-intindi natin ng rape and sexual violence, okay, it is unique in itself na kailangan natin siyang tignan, hindi lamang bilang isang subset okay, ng isa pang oppression, kundi very unique in a sense that it recognizes the different impacts sa iba't ibang mga tao. At yung harm na yon ay nararanasan din, it's expressed and experienced differently. So iba't iba rin yung levels and impacts ng harm and wrong na nagagawa sa mga tao. But what is good here is that kailangan nating maintindihan that itong same society na to, okay, that perpetuates this, we can reclaim, no, pwede nating i-reclaim yung voices natin and yung spaces natin by looking at the society as also a complex of habit. It might look na impervious siya to change. Mahirap mami-alter ang institutions. No, web yan ng iba't ibang mga sistema. Okay? But it is capable of change. No, this society is capable of change. It is a complexes of it's the institutions are complexes of habits, and that we can always redirect them. Okay, and that the meaning making is always a fluid, malleable, and continuous process. So yung pag-make sense natin ng mga experiences natin na ito, hindi yun natatapos ng pagtingin lang ng mga rape supportive attitudes, ng rape culture, etc. But nandoon yung control natin, okay, in this meaning making by looking at it as a continuous process. Okay, so I am enjoining everyone to still be reflexive, okay, and still be open, okay, para sa mas inclusive, mas diverse na mga accounts and analysis on rape and sexual violence related issues. Okay, so I'll be happy to also listen to your insights, okay, about this specific issue. Right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Marga, for that extremely enlightening educational discussion. Personally, I found it was a very emotional journey for me personally because this is a very heavy topic, and honestly, ma'am, you handled it excellently. So thank you for that on behalf of the organization. Now comes the part where the audience gets to be involved po. Before that, Philosoc would like to recognize our partner organizations for this event, namely Gabriela Yus, UPLB, and PUP Societas Philosophy. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Gabriela Youth UPLB is a national democratic mass organization that aims for the liberation of women. PUP Societas Philosophy is an academic organization that envisions students to be critical, compassionate, and fair, as supported by philosophical theories inside the classroom and proven through application in their everyday lives. PUP Societas Philosophy's logo is inspired from Plato's The True, the Good, and the Beautiful, that is embodied from PUP's pylon, truth, excellence, and wisdom as the three pillars. The color symbolizes the passion and the ideas of Marx against the oppression of the people. Just a quick reminder to everybody in the audience and also to all of the members of Philosoc that first of all, if you want to say something, just click the raise hand button in Zoom so that you can be added to the speakers list so that we can remain organized. Secondly, everybody please be charitable and kind. We all know that we want to learn from each other, and apart from that, this is also a very difficult thing to talk about. But because I mean, personally, my personal commitment to it is I have to talk about it because I am committed to change. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask questions. With that, we can start the philosophical discussion. So, does anybody have initial thoughts about what was just discussed, or does anybody have questions that they want to propose to the audience or questions for our guest speaker? If so, you are welcome to raise your hand. Oh, I think somebody wants to speak. Dwayne Rivera, go ahead. You may speak.
Um, Hello po.
Hello.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Dwayne Rivera from PUP Societas Philosophiae. I'm an incoming third year. And my question is that, how backwards are we in the Philippines for us being labeled as conservative and a Catholic country po, no? In this kind of issues, how do we address it, or how badly do we address it, and how do we change that mindset for us to be able to become progressive to tackle this, pragmatically? Yun lang po.
Thank you very much for your question, Dwayne. Anybody can answer this question if they would like to. Does anybody have a response?
Okay, maybe I'll start. No? Medyo breaking,
Okay.
medyo funny kanina yung signal. Pero tama ba na how backwards are we as
Opo.
a society, and how should we address medyo may narinig ako about religion or being a Catholic country. Tama ba?
Opo, ma'am, I heard the same thing po.
Yeah. Oo. No, so that's a very practical thing to ask. No, so kung makikita natin, I can actually or categorically say or exactly sa how backwards are we na ba in sa usapin na ito, no? Pero gusto kong mas ma-highlight yung fact and yung mga movements na meron tayo right now, okay, in addressing these issues, that we already have the platforms, the voices, and the people committed to change the conversation. Doon nagsisimula lagi yun eh. No? So that's why napaka-importante napaka-importante ng edukasyon. Okay? Ito lagi yung tool, ito yung lagi yung institution kung saan kaya nating, because institutions or the educational institutions are the formative locations of individuals. Okay? Malaking factor to sa pag-shape, sa pagbuo, okay, ng mga citizens. No? So in that sense, we learn, we relearn, we unlearn, okay, sa schools natin, sa universities natin, etc. Okay? And how do we address it pragmatically? No? So if very pragmatic actually yung mindset, no, that we have to recognize the transformation, the possibility of transformation of our society. Okay? Kasi kung wala tayong commitment for that, okay, we cannot locate the barriers. And how do we locate the barriers? Paano tayo magsisimula? Okay, we have to recognize the problem. Okay, a very pragmatic approach here is we have to recognize that there is a problem. Until we recognize that this is an existing problem, hindi natin malolocate yung roots. Okay, we cannot locate the barriers. Okay, ito yung lagi kong sinasabi. It actually applies sa maraming bagay. No? So kung hindi natin, for example, kung hindi natin i-recognize na may problema sa existing educational system natin ngayon, okay, paano natin uumpisahan yung reforma? Paano natin pag-uusapan yung change na gusto natin? Okay? At napaka-crucial, napaka-crucial ng pag-recognize ng problema na ito. Okay? Kasi nag-overlap yan, no, yung belief systems natin, mga perspectives natin. Hindi lang naman basta-basta para, okay, naniniwala na ako na merong, for example, no, sa mga iba't ibang, for example, mga post-feminist, okay, naniniwala ako na may oppression ng mga babae, pero okay na yun kasi nanalo naman na tayo dun sa mga basic battles natin eh. Okay? So parang that's it. No? So how can we push through? How can we go on with the conversation if hindi tayo lahat nagre-recognize na ito yung problema? Okay? So, yan. I also like to hear yung insights ng iba on this? How do you propose to change this mindset, to change this system?
Ma'am, I think Kuya Jeko Bahar has something to say. I'm not sure if it's a response though. Go ahead, Kuya Jeko.
Hi everyone. Hi Teddy. Am I being heard clearly?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. Gusto ko lang i-affirm yung sinabi ni Ma'am. I do think na that's a really pragmatic way to solve nga yung pagiging siguro conservative o backwards ng society. And I believe na totoo yung statement ni Ma'am about a lot of people either epistemologically parang hindi lang talaga nila nare-recognize na mayroong mali sa society or ayaw nilang i-recognize na meron. And I think totoo yung malaking part ng mga tao na hindi nila nare-recognize yung problem or yung kamalian sa society kung bakit hindi nagpo-forward yung discussion into and the actual reality into the actual possibility of changing. Kasi nung itong mga past few weeks during the quarantine, napapansin ko lang with the arguments I'm seeing online sa Facebook kanon, parang when I analyze it, in my opinion, it goes back sa problema na it is as if the people believe that what we have right now and what we know right now, what system we have right now is the only system that is possible. Na parang there is no alternative with what we have right now. So with that, I think malaking parte yun sa kung bakit sobrang problematic ngayon ng society natin. It's because the people are not recognizing the fact na there is a problem and that aside from that, there is a problem. There is or there are alternatives that we can do or that we can get if we accept the fact that there is a problem and that we can change that problem or that we can solve that problem by changing what we have right. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response, Kuya Jeko. We really appreciate it. I think I was the next person to raise my hand po. So I digress. It's not what I'm about to say is not really related to the question that Dwayne posed. I have my own question, which is that when, let's say, somebody has been testimonially smothered, like they're self-silencing themselves for for their own reasons, and of course due to the hearer's incompetence, can we still consider that person a feminist? Because to me it seems like self-silencing, although I understand completely how difficult it is to testify. It seems like a lapse in the commitment to change. And earlier it was said that as a feminist, it's not enough to know the theories, it's not enough to know the concepts. You have to be committed to doing what it takes to make those changes happen. So that's my question po. Again, anybody can respond. That's an open question po if anybody would like to respond.
Clarify ko lang, Teddy, yung mismong person na yun or yung, tama ba? Can you still call yourself a feminist if you self-silence yourself because of testimonial smothering? Is that right?
Opo, that's my question po, ma'am.
Okay. So sa pagtingin mo is it's antithetical to the goal, is that right?
Opo. At least, I mean, I know I might be uninformed, so it's a very open question. I'm trying to
Yeah.
set
I'm
aside my
trying to
biases
clarify
po.
no para makuha ko yung question mo, no. So
Opo.
so why again do you think nagiging antithetical siya dun sa aim ng feminist philosophy or sa goal natin in in changing the systems and changing the society?
I think that it's like counterintuitive to the goal, because when you self-silence yourself, you keep the reputation of the rapist inaccurate, and you fail to protect other people from the potential of that person repeating their crimes, especially. And you also miss the chance to empower other victims, because personally I believe that seeing other people testify is empowering for other victims. It inspires people to come forward with their own stories, and missing that chance seems like ayun, a lapse in the commitment to change.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Kaya dito pumapasok, no? Dito pumapasok yung napaka-importanting konsepto sa feminist thought, which is the context, no? So apart from, of course, kung meron naman tayong platform, no? Kung meron naman tayong, if we have the words, if we have the courage, if we have the resources to come forward with our stories, with our personal narratives, to be able to, of course, influence, no, para mas malaki yung maging impact natin sa society, para mas ma-recognize yung mga pinagdaanan natin, the things, that experiences that we endured. I think dito papasok, Teddy, yung salitang contextual sensibility, no? Actually, very underexplored ang silensyo, ang silence pagdating sa feminism, and ganun din sa um, uh, uh, feminist philosophy. Okay, silence is actually a very complicated, a very complex, no, a very complex issue, a very complex na konsepto. Okay, so may iba na tinitignan nila ang silence as a resistance, as a form of resistance. Merong iba, ang ginagawa nila is to break that silence, no? Pero in feminist politics, okay, in feminist politics, if we are to stay true in the feminist politics, we need to know where we are. Okay? We need to start where we are. And if that person, okay, if that person is still coming to terms with his or her experiences, if that person is still making sense of his or her experiences and not ready to not ready to come forward with his or her personal stories of abuse, of sexual violence, as I have mentioned kanina, it is a very dangerous task. No, you are recalling a violent reality of your experience. You are recalling a very dangerous memory. Okay? Kasi ang tinitignan natin ang ethical harm of rape, kasi pinaparalyze niya tayo eh. Pinaparalyze niya yung sexualidad natin, yung pagbuo natin bilang isang sexual human being. And anything or everything that has to do with our sexuality, it atrophies us. It inhibits us from achieving, no, yung potential pa natin, yung potential pa ng personhood natin, no? So ako ang pagtingin ko dito is, if the person chooses to self-silence because of the harms, okay, we need to look at the context. Kaya laging dapat context-specific tayo. Context discursive dapat lagi. Titignan natin ano ba yung konteksto ng tao. Halimbawa, tulad ng example natin kanina, what if yung perpetrator mo is yung boss mo? You really need the job. Okay? Kailangan mo yung pera, kailangan mo yung trabaho. Okay? But you also want to free yourself, no, doon sa mga sa prison ng experiences, sa trauma ng mga experiences mo na yon. But to do so would mean losing your job. But to do so would mean risking your job, your life, okay, your loved ones' lives, okay, na mga nakadepende sa iyo. And you cannot just do that, no? Dito papasok yung konsepto ng privilege. Dito papasok yung konsepto ng konteksto. Okay? So maganda na lumabas din yung ganitong issue para makita natin yung contextual sensibility. Okay, ito yung nagagawa ng contextual sensibility, na kapag tinitignan natin yung konteksto ng isang bagay, ng isang issue, nakikita natin yung interplay ng iba't ibang mga diskurso na nakapalibot doon. no? Ano ba yung privileges na meron siya? Ano ba yung resources na meron siya? Okay? So, lahat yun, magkakasama yun. Tulad nga ng sabi ko, hindi natin ma-isolate. No? So, for example, nag-come forward ako. Okay, ang abuser ko ay ang boss ko, for example. And you risk everything that you have. Okay, and that is not just something you can isolate. Okay, i-isolate ko yung parte ng buhay ko na to, ipapark ko muna yung parte ng buhay ko na to. I can go on with my life. I can just find another job. I can just look for another boss, etc. No? Doon natin makikita yung interplay ng iba't ibang mga resources, privilege, konteksto na meron tayo bilang mga individuals, and we operate. Okay, we operate sa mga temporal na mga spatial and temporal na mga backgrounds na ito. Okay? So, yeah, no. So if you have follow up or a response to that, or meron pa kayong other insights, no, I'd be very glad to listen to them.
Thank you very much for your response, ma'am. It was very enlightening for me. I would just like to manifest my personal experience, and this is very difficult for me to do. I won't delve into the details because, well, for one thing, I would like to strongly affirm what ma'am has taught us tonight, which is that recalling is very dangerous work. Something that my therapist tells me all the time is that your memories are strongly tied to your emotions when you have been traumatized. So every time the memory comes up, all of the terrible feelings that come with those memories will come. And basically, the process of healing from that in therapy is trying to separate the memories from the emotions, because trauma is very clingy. Trauma is something that even if you want to let go, hindi ka niya bibitawan basta-basta. And for me, I feel like I'm somebody who is self-silencing. And the reason is very complex and it is highly contextual, which is kaya parang na-validate ako sa mga sinabi ni ma'am. Because the reason that I silence myself is because I'm an empath. And if my abuser gets hurt, I will feel that pain as much as he feels that pain. And that's just my nature. That's not something I can avoid. So even if hurting him will bring me a sense of justice, as whatever justice may be, it will hurt me more. So to me, even if it requires sacrificing, making accurate the reputation of this abuser, even if it requires sacrificing the ability to protect other people from this person, right now I'm at a point that I can only choose self-preservation. And I manifest this because I have encountered people who are very pushy, who know what happened to me and who know who did it. And they keep trying to guilt trip me into coming forward with my story when they have no regard for my context. They have no contextual sensibility, as you said, po, ma'am. And I would just like everybody to learn from that I hope we understand the context of different kinds of victims, because the politics, the rape culture that we have all internalized so heavily, and epistemic injustice, it's very complicated. And I just wish people would have more empathy for victims and understanding why they do the things that they do. Yun lang po ang aking manifestation. I think next on the speakers list, and he lowered his hand already, is Rainier. Rainier, do you still want to say something?
Yung ano kasi, yung response ko kasi is yung pinakaunang to the first question, yung response ko. So, ayun, since natawag na ako, sasabi ko na rin. Sa tingin ko is isa sa mga challenges against feminism is yung kung paano nakatay yung religion sa ating belief, sa ating culture. Kasi madami akong na-encounter online na nang victim shaming sila. Tapos they be like, nagpo-quote sila ng Bible verses. Dapat sabi sa getong Bible verse, kailangan modest ang suot mo, kailangan di ka nagpapakita ng ito, ganyan. O kung susundin mo lang to, wala sa yung mangyari masama. And napaka-problematic siya for me. Sa tingin ko, one of the solutions I can think of is itap yung churches natin sa Pilipinas na iba yung problematic, i-point out na problematic yung ganitong thinking na kailangan lang magsuot ng ayon, kasi ayon sa Bible, ganito dapat magsuot, kaya dapat ito sundin. Parang itap mismo yung church natin na they have to say something about these things, this kind of problematic mindset.
Thank you very much for that response, Rainier. Next on the speakers list, I think, is Aris. Go ahead, Aris. You can speak now.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
All right. Hi, ma'am. I just want to ask a question about a different topic, but this is still related to feminism. I encountered this motion po before that pushes for transgenders to distance themselves from the LGBT community and join the feminist movement instead. Context po behind this is the implicit fact na ang transgenders, at least in the Philippine context, ang pinaka-marginalized sa LGBT community because Filipinos can only tolerate lesbians, gays, and bisexuals, but not transgenders to that extent. What's your take po ba tungkol dito? Is it justified, or if not really justified, is it going to be strategic for both movements, i.e. LGBT community and feminist movement, if the transgender sector jumped ship from LGBT to feminist movement? Yun lang po.
Hi, what's your name again? Sorry, nakalimutan ko.
Aris po.
Hi, Aris. Hi. It's a very interesting question, no? Pero some are not actually that informed that with the history of feminism as a movement, no, nagkaroon napakalaking debate. Okay? So napakalaking debate even in feminist philosophy ang inclusion, okay, of transgender, okay, and queer theories, okay, pagdating sa feminist philosophy or feminism as a movement. Pero marami ng initiatives, okay, and there are feminists, no, particularly, feminist philosophers, who lobby for a kind of understanding of feminism that is not only focused on women. Okay, from the very start, ang argument naman talaga ng feminism is like a humanist feminism. In that sense, we recognize dahil meron tayong historical oppression ang mga kababaihan, kaya ang focus natin is to look to examine the oppression, and subordination against women, by the patriarchal society. Pero meron ng mga initiatives kung saan mas gustong i-portray ng mga feminist philosophers or ng feminists a kind of feminism that is not only exclusive for women, but for other marginalized groups, no, and that includes the LGBTQ plus community, not only the trans genders. So yung theories na to actually sinasama ko to, no, dun sa discussion namin in feminist philosophy, because ako, if you will ask about my take here, of course, trans women are women, no, so malaki yung na-occupy na space pa rin ng mga TERFs na tinatawag natin, or yung mga feminists that oppose, no, this kind of view and pinipilit na i-distansya o tanggalin sa usapin, okay, ang mga trans women bilang mga kababaihan o kasama ng mga kababaihan, okay, sa battle natin, no, in this movement. So noon pa man, so my answer to your question is noon pa man meron ng initiative in feminism and in feminist philosophy to include, okay, and to siguro ano bang right term dito, siguro na hindi naman i-absorb, no, pero sumama no doon sa mga usapin, okay, ng LGBTQ plus community, okay, doon sa sa mga issues and concerns ng feminism as a movement. Okay, so and my take on that is, of course, no, trans women are women. Okay, so I hope I answered your question.
Yes po, thank you. Pero ma'am, tanong ko lang, hindi po ba siya magiging risky for the feminist movement here in the Philippines?
Bakit siya magiging risky?
Kasi ma'am, like, we're very conservative in our context of viewing people, and then ang concern ko lang po if inabsorb ng feminism, like I think that's a better term, if inabsorb or so kinover din ng feminist movement yung transgenders, but Filipino people in general don't like transgenders, is it going to be a good move po ba for the feminist movement, or is it going to be a strategic move for the feminist movement given na sila rin ay merong pinaglalaban given na may sila rin ay may pinaglalaban dati pa?
Okay. Hindi naman hiwalay yung laban ng mga ito, no, against sa iisang opresyon, sa iisang sistema ng opresyon na nararanasan natin sa patriarchal na society na ito. So, hindi ko actually masagot kung paano natin siya ita-tackle head-on bilang napaka-conservative, we are a Catholic dominated, no, na country, very religious ang mga tao, etc. But mas gusto kong bigyan ng highlight or ng focus yung yung solidarity, no? Yung pagsasama-sama natin laban sa iisang sistema ng opresyon na kinakaharap nating or na dinadanas nating lahat. So lagi naman lagi naman kapag meron tayong mga bagong ideya, pag may mga bagong movement, we all go through birth pains, eka nga, no? We all go through a maiden voyage, eka nga. So even sa mga ganitong movements, no, ang importante ay magsisimula tayo. Okay? Ang importante is i-recognize natin itong problema na ito at i-recognize din natin na kailangan natin manghamig, no? Kailangan natin mag-educate, mag-enlighten, patuloy na isama yung mga tao, no? Lalo na yung mga tao na hindi informed, walang access sa mga ganitong impormasyon sa lipunan. Okay? So, again, no, noon pa man, aim na ng feminism at ng feminist philosophy to address these issues, and that to not only be exclusive for women, but to all members of the marginalized groups or communities, and at the same time, even men. Diba? Ito nga yung lagi ko sinasabi, don't you know? No? Nung minsan na meron akong nakadebate sa isang academic conference, don't you know that feminism also benefits men? No? Kasi hindi lang naman natin pinaglalaban yung karapatan ng mga kababaihan o yung opresyon na nararanasan ng mga kababaihan, but also yung same oppression na isinasubject sa atin nung iisang sistema ng subordination na to, na biktima rin yung mga lalaki at yung mga iba pang miyembro ng marginalized communities, no? So, yun yung gusto kong ma-emphasize, no? Yun yung isang stereotype pagdating sa feminism. Pang babae lang yan eh. No, para maging feminist, dapat babae ka or dapat may alam ka tungkol sa mga kababaihan, etc. But feminism is actually its goal is more it emphasizes more on a greater human development goal, no, that which is for humanity. Kaya nga may iba, alam niyo ba na may ibang na-shift niya yung ibang usapin sa feminism tungkol sa bagamat nire-recognize natin yung gendered nature natin bilang mga human beings, nagkakaroon na rin ng shift doon sa pagtingin that women are dehumanized, not because or not only because they are women, pero yung effect na yun ay because they are human beings. Okay? So yeah, I hope that you are also able to learn today, that feminism or to be a feminist, you only have to be a woman or to be sympathetic, etc., to women or to the plight of these marginalized communities. But when you commit to change this oppression, okay, when you commit to end all forms of subordination, whether lalaki man, miyembro man ng LGBTQ plus community o ng mga kababaihan ang nakakaranas ng mga ito, if you commit yourself to end this oppression, then you can call yourself a feminist.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So next on our speakers list is Rainier. Go ahead, Rainier. It's your turn to speak.
Question to, nag-message sa akin yung isa kong friend, tapos may gusto siyang itanong sa ating, i-discuss natin lahat. Dalawa tong question. Una, how can we reconcile our religious tradition and beliefs, being modest and conservative with the feminist movement? The second, is women sexualizing themselves a backset to feminism? For example, OnlyFans or etc. Ayun lang.
Ano yung last part? Sorry. I think I missed the last part ng sinabi mo.
Yung last question is women sexualizing themselves a backset to feminism? For example, OnlyFans or etc.
Okay. Okay, anyone who wants to answer first or shed light on the questions asked?
I think Kuya Jeko would like to say something. Go ahead, Kuya Jeko.
Hello, Daddy. I'm here ba?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Actually, sa ano to, sa previous question pa.
I
Of,
see.
want
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. Pero siguro dun sa previous question, I just want to say na una, I agree with what Ma'am Tagana said. Tapos for me kasi, ako, personally, I identify myself as of the moment as a Marxist feminist. And that is because, first, I believe that there is, or that the women's oppression is existing. And secondly, because, and another one is that I also believe that the two-headed beast of capitalist and patriarchal system is the source of these oppressions of women, and that I also try, and contribute in the end to end this oppression. So with that, ang gusto kong sabihin sana kanina ay dun sa question na kung magiging beneficial ba if the trans women or the transgenders are included, in the women's movement to liberate women or the movement to liberate women. I think regardless pa kung ang tingin natin sa mga trans women ay women or so, no? I think babalik tayo dun sa napag-usapan din natin last week, no, sa last episode natin, no, about the need and the necessity to go beyond intersectionalism and to go beyond identity politics. By that I mean na kailangan nating ma-recognize that beyond the identity politics and the issues being intersectional, may isang common na struggle and source of oppression, which is yung capitalism as a system natin ngayon at yung patriarchy. So with that, when we recognize that, I think regardless na kung ano yung gender natin or saang sector tayo napapabilang, of course, we recognize that as important, pero we will go to the parang common source of oppression natin, which is yung nasabi ko kanina, capitalism and patriarchy. So kapag ganon, dito ma-affirm yung sinabi kanina ni Ma'am. It's more of the need for solidarity. For us, no, regardless yung differences natin sa mga struggles natin, sa kind of oppression that we are experiencing, regardless, the need for us to be united to fight our common enemy. So, ayun, I think that answers yung question kanina ni Aris. Tapos siguro, ang nakukuha kong worry ni Aris dun sa question niya ay maybe it will cause divide, kumbaga, sa, bawa sa ating mga Pilipino kasi nga conservative tayo, grabe yung epekto ng religion sa atin. Pero I think labas pa doon sa usapin ng differences nga natin individually. We have our common grounds. And I think what we need to do is to identify, no, as a group, as Filipinos, kung ano yung common grounds natin. And when we do that, we can identify now na isa lang naman yung kalaban natin or yung pinaka-source ng kalaban natin. Ayun. Tapos, can you repeat yung question ni Rainier?
Yung question po ni Rainier, ay hindi ko po na-note.
Ay, so yung
Thank you, Rainier.
yung question ko kanina is women sexualizing themselves, setback to feminism, for example, OnlyFans or porn or anything related to that.
Thank you for the question, Rainier. Does anybody have a response to that? I have a response to that, but does anybody want to go first? No one? Okay. Ay, oo nga, ako naman yung first. So I have an answer to that, I think. I don't think that women sexualizing themselves is a setback for feminism because let's say the popular idea is that sexualizing women is bad. But I think that lacks a bit of context. I think the predominant idea should be that it is not okay to sexualize women without their consent. Because if we say that women sexualizing themselves is a setback to feminism, then that is saying that women are not sexual beings. That elicits the idea that women cannot be sexualized because we don't have sexuality. When in reality, for me, I think that women can be sexualized, but without stepping on our autonomy. We can be sexualized if we want to be sexualized because just like men, women are also sexual beings. So I'm actually I like the idea of an OnlyFans because women are already over sexualized in society, in my opinion. And just seeing women capitalize on that, turning it into an advantage instead of a disadvantage, pleases me in a way because I see it as their way of flipping the system. So if people are gonna sexualize you, you might as well make money off of it. And I don't see anything wrong with that idea as long as these women have not been coerced into these conditions. As long as these women are fully consenting to be sexualized by these people. As long as there's consent, to me, then there's nothing wrong with sexualizing a woman. That's my response about Rainier's question. So, does anybody else have a response to Rainier's question? For those who have their hands raised, are all of you going to respond to Rainier's question? I think
Um, yeah.
Aris wants to respond. Go ahead, Aris.
Hi. All right. Regarding the second question about women sexualizing themselves, if it's something to be supported or to be condemned, um, I can't help it, but I just remember our lecture back then sa political ideologies that there are two opposing sides kasi that can be used to answer that question. And that depends on kung nasaan ka sa spectrum ng feminism. If you're part of the liberal feminist or Marxist feminist. Kasi if you are a liberal feminist, then you will surely support it no matter what, as long as women consented to do that. Like, my body, my choice, it's my decision, right? It's part of my body autonomy to do that, and there's nothing wrong with it as long as I want what I'm doing. But on the other hand, the overarching question kasi sa Marxist feminism is if it's really their own choice or coerced sila by this patriarchal society to think that it is part of their choice. Kasi sa tingin ng Marxist feminist, if women go to sex works, for example, or if women um, flaunt their individuality, flaunt their sexuality, it's not really their choice. Kasi there are no opportunities in the society that they can get money from, or walang jobs, for example, or walang maayos na employment rate sa Philippines, for example, kaya sila napipilitan na mag-resort into those types of outlets just to get money. So it's not really their choice. It's not really their consent that gave them that decision to resort to those types of outlets. So feeling ko, it depends talaga kung paano mo view yung feminism. Kasi as much as I want to respect liberal feminist, the ideology of liberal feminism about supporting women's consent, supporting women's choice, and supporting what they want to do with their body, I can't help but think that maybe nakalatag lang in front of them yung limited number of options that they tend to not see other options available for themselves to help other women into the particular matter. So, ayun lang. So, my personal take actually is I'm leaning towards the Marxist feminist perspective towards this issue and say na I can't fully support the idea that it's entirely their choice to do that. Yun lang. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Iris. I would just like to apologize to the person whose email address is DMA Marilio, because I realized that you were supposed to respond first. I'm sorry I didn't see your chat, but you can go ahead and speak now. Just introduce yourself and then go ahead. Yun lang po. I'm so sorry.
Hello po. Naririnig po ba ako?
Yes, we can hear you po.
Okay. Thank you po. So, my name is Loris from UPLB. I'm a philo student rin po. So, my earlier response to Rainier was yung question na are women sexualizing themselves are setbacks. I think that the question is problematic because my view is that women who sexualize themselves are in tune, or they are embodying their sexuality, and men think this is, they disapprove of this kasi nga we have an idea na ay kapag babae dapat Maria Clara lang. You cannot be a sexual being, you cannot accept yourself as a sexual being kasi nga you are supposed to be like an object or instrument according to the patriarchy. So, yun, I think the question itself is supposed to be that women are sexualizing themselves, but rather they're accepting and are acknowledging that they are sexual beings. And yung pong kay Kuya Aris na response kanina, parang naisip ko lang po na yung I agree that sometimes women have no choice to commodify themselves. Pero I thought that isn't this coming from a really hateful, misogynistic, patriarchal thinking, kaya naiisip ng women na they don't have a choice but to commodify themselves, rather than thinking na, ay, kaya ko rin yung mga ginagawa ng ibang tao. I can do other things na, and katulad ng mga work jobs na panlalaki lang. So, yun po.
Thank you very much po for that response. I think next on our speakers list is Au. Au, do you have a response to Rainier's question also?
Ayun. I actually agree with the concept of consent with regards to sexualizing women. However, sinabi na nga ni ma'am kanina na medyo shaky kasi ang concept of consent. And I'm also going to take into context yung sinabi ni Rainier kanina na would sexualizing women in terms of pornography, for example, be a hindrance to feminism? Because, well, we all know, especially with regards to heterosexual pornography, na it's actually created to satisfy the patriarchal fetish, diba? It's very patriarchal in nature, BDS, pornos about BDSM, or even just any pornography that involves a heterosexual male and a heterosexual female um uh committing to intercourse in front of a camera. Uh, I really, I'm kind of in between places with regards to whether sexualizing women does do good for feminism or it doesn't. Kasi there's still this um there's still this tendency of having women's sexualization as something that satisfies a patriarchal fetish, or something that is still within the boundaries of patriarchal standards. So ayun po.
Thank you for that response, Al. Um, I think tech team, who's next on the list po? I think Aris is
Can I
next
say
on
something on
the... sige po ma'am, go ahead po.
Oh no, very interesting. No, I'm actually very glad, no, to hear this exchange of ideas and insights. And it's a very interesting question too. Um, the history, no, of women's sexuality. No, we can trace it, no, as early as the ancient, no, the ancient period. No, and of course, no, we are reminded of Freud. We are reminded of Carl Jung. Okay, itong mga thinkers na to, they have different accounts, no, on how to understand women's sexuality. Okay, well, the problem lies in the fact that they have these accounts of an understanding of women's sexuality. Okay, and it contradicts, no, yung fact that they are male, no, they are men talking about women's sexuality. Okay, so kung medyo mas dadalhin pa natin yung usapin, no, sa philosophy, gusto kong i-introduce, no, yung idea ng epistemology of ignorance. Okay, kaya nga malaki yung clamor, malaki yung call sa feminist movement, no, even in in feminist philosophy, on giving the space to women, okay, to explore their own sexuality. Okay, we're reminded of the penis envy kasi daw we're afraid of castration, etc. That men are afraid of castration, etc. Penis envy, anima women. Ito yung mga iba't ibang accounts of women's sexuality ng mga male thinkers na ito, no? So, makikita natin dito that for the longest time, men are actually talking about our, no, women's sexuality, no? So that's why the call is for women to explore, for women to make sense, okay, of their experiences as, or their sexuality as women. Okay, so tulad ng sinasabi ko, meron tayong tinatawag na epistemology of ignorance, no? Kung meron tayong konsepto ng pag-alam doon sa mga bagay that we know, okay, yung knowing, meron ding politics behind not knowing. And ito, at ito ay isang usapin, no, na pwede nating gamitin yung phenomenon, no, ng female orgasm, for example. So, makikita natin ang practices natin sa society, tayo ay hindi ganun ka-open pagdating sa ating sexuality. Okay? Sometimes, no, nagiging siguro taboo or hindi ganun ka-open, no, na usapin yung tungkol sa female orgasm, tungkol sa female sexuality, okay, tungkol sa G-spot, etc. No? So itong mga bagay na to that comprise women's sexuality, or specifically in the female orgasm, no, na discourse, makikita natin that we actually had very little knowledge about our sexuality. Okay, that is because, of course, one of the things na naging product, no, nung ating historical na suppression, ng ating historical na oppression. So we have to also recognize, no, that itong ignorance natin sa bagay na to, itong hindi natin pagkakaroon ng malawak na ideya tungkol sa mismong sarili nating sexuality is also active production. No, maaaring active production siya ng isang society, ng isang community. Okay? Na makikita natin na sinasilence, no? Sinasilence yung mga ganitong klaseng knowledge. Okay? Sa maraming paraan at sa maraming mga rason. Okay? So, in this sense, we can see that our ignorance about our sexuality is not really a simple lack. Hindi talaga natin sila alam, but it was more often than not, constructed yun, no? Maintained yun, disseminated yun, no? Na link siya doon sa ating cognitive authority, link siya sa authority, sa doubt, sa trust, and sa silencing, no, nung mga kababaihan, no, specifically nga sa issue ng female sexuality and female orgasm. So makikita natin dito that there are knowledge, no, there are these kinds of information na we thought we just lack the knowledge about these things, but because disseminated siya, reinforce and maintain yung ignorance natin sa mga bagay na to. At makikita natin to sa iba't ibang mga forma. Okay, tulad ng yun nga, yung issue ng pagiging yung chastity issue, purity, virginity, okay, even virginity, no? Lahat ng mga ito yung inimpose sa atin ng mga ng patriarchal society. Okay, tungkol sa ating sexuality. That's why we are also ashamed, no? At the same time, as women, sometimes we are ashamed to even look at our bodies. Okay? Nahihiwalay yung ownership natin ng body natin to explore our sexuality because of these kinds of conditioning, yung social conditioning tungkol sa ating sexuality mismo. Okay? So tama si Aris, no, doon sa depende sa pagtingin nung isang specific strand, halimbawa ng feminism. Kasi I am also reminded, for example, that it can also be applied sa issue, for example, ng prostitution. Okay? So, are prostitutes, okay? Prostitutes because they choose to be one. Okay? Masasabi ba talaga natin na personal nilang decision yon? Personal choice ba talaga nila yon? Nag-consent talaga sila, okay, to be a prostitute? Or irerespeto ba natin na choice niya kasi na piliin yung ganong trabaho. So long as consenting siya, wala tayong problema. That is very liberal, no? That's a liberal conception, no, nung ganong klaseng pagtingin doon sa ganong klaseng issue. At the same time, pwedeng itanong or pwedeng i-interrogate yon ng radical feminists, saying na ito na nga ito yung problema natin sa consent. Are we really consenting? Meron ba talaga tayong control sa consent natin? Okay? And can we really be or can it really be our choice? Okay? Totoo ba or masasabi ba talaga nating choice natin halimbawa maging prostitute? Okay? Choice ba talaga natin 'yon or marami lang mga factors sa buhay natin na nagpo-push sa atin o nagdadala sa atin doon, nag-shape sa atin doon sa choice na pinili natin. Okay? So may mga ganito, no, na iba't ibang take, iba't ibang pagtingin depende doon sa kung ano yung strand, okay, na tumitingin doon sa specific issue. But of course, no, itong mga strands na to naman, liberal feminism, Marxist, okay, existentialist, ecofeminism, radical, okay, socialist, etc. Itong mga ito ay overlapping pa rin naman, no? Of course, feminist thought is very ancient na to the point that they are already being categorized, no? Or compartmentalized. Pero in reality or in truth, ito ay continually na nag-iiba. Ito ay dynamic. Okay, ito yung rigor eh. Andito yung rigor and vigor of feminist thinking, that which it is diverse and at the same time it is continually changing, no, depending on the socio-political and historical context of that time. Okay, so sa question kanina, magandang issue yung mga naitatanong natin. Okay, kaya nga sabi ko ang kagandahan sa philosophy, we're not really looking or we're not really settling for a categorical answer in these issues, but it pays to look at the different questions, no, na nakapalibot pa, na nagsusurround pa, that we need to unpack no, to further understand, to further illuminate, okay, yung mga issues na nakapalibot, okay, or mga matters na nakapalibot sa mga issues na ito. Okay. So yes, thank you.
Thank you po, Ma'am Marga, for your response. So, okay, on the speakers list, it is my turn to speak. Yung response ko po ay sa sinabi ni Aris. And honestly, I agree with you, Aris, that there's always the question, katulad nga ng sabi ni Ma'am, that is it really our choice? Because we have been conditioned in many ways, especially women, historically, because women have been commodified for their sexuality historically for a very, very long time. And there's no knowing if our choices are really our choices. But personally, I also believe that we are not slaves to our conditioning. We have the power within ourselves to unlearn those things and to be free of those biases and thus make those choices. But I would like to contextualize that this is probably only available to people who are highly privileged. I think that we can only really say that a woman who is, let's say, capitalizing on people sexualizing her is willingly doing so with full consent if she has a lot of privilege. Because in that context, no amount of nothing is oppressing her basically into making that choice. But I also believe that that really exists because I would like to share some anecdotal evidence. When I was in Amsterdam, I did a walking tour, and the institutions around prostitution in Amsterdam are really protective of prostitutes. They turned it into a legitimate career. And for me, I realize now that I'm a very liberal feminist, I feel like that is the condition, that is the context wherein we can say women have fully consented to being sexualized and capitalizing on their sexuality. So I believe that specific context exists. But I think that Iris is right for most of the world, wherein women are not really consenting to being, let's say, prostituted, because not all women are protected by the same institutions that the prostitutes in Amsterdam are being protected by. So, yun lang po yung gusto ko i-manifest. That's all. Next,
Yeah,
tech
can
team, who is... Po? Sorry?
Yeah. I would just like to affirm din yung sinabi mo. Is that the Red District? It's very
Oh, po,
interesting.
the Red District.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very interesting yung prostitution in specifically in Amsterdam, no. But anyway, it can also be applied, no, lalo din sa issue, for example, ng pornography. It was mentioned in passing a while ago, but para na rin ma-contextualize natin. Actually, very complex pa rin kasi relevant itong issue ng pornography on the way we examine the issue of rape. Okay, so a lot of feminists are actually faulting, no, yung pornography. Okay, pornography as the theory and the rape is the practice. So because we are used to seeing pornographic videos, contents, images, and it portrays women as the submissive, women as submissive, and na-eroticize yung male dominance doon. Okay? Ito yung sinasabi ni Catherine McKinnon, all the more na mas na mas nagiging compulsory yung nature ng heterosexuality, and at the same time mas nagkakaroon ng portrayal ng babae that when the girl or when the woman says no, the woman actually says yes, no, or that the woman actually wants it, no, or baliktad nung action or nung sinasabi niya. Ganun kasi sila i-portray in most of pornographic materials, right? So a lot of feminists, no, specifically mga radical and socialist feminists, they fault pornography kasi ang laki niyang influence, yung impact niya, okay, na nako-condition lalo, okay, ang mga individuals that women should be submissive, and at the same time women must submit to the whims of men, for example. So kaya ang nangyayari is that yung nagiging practice is rape. It is translated, natatranslate yung mga ganitong portrayal from pornography to rape. But if you also look at, for example, the liberal conceptions of pornography, we can also look at the issue ng consent again. No? Well, these women consented. These women actually chose the career of becoming a star, a pornographic star. No? So, or the woman chose this specific career, etc. No, but we should always and always go back, no, doon sa interplay, sa intersections ng iba't ibang mga social and cultural factors. Okay, that's in place, no, that surrounds yung issues na kinakaharap natin. Okay? Yun lang. Thank you.
Thank you po, Ma'am Marga, for that response. Gusto ko lang din po i-manifest that the blame on the porn industry is a very popular idea these days. But I personally think that while porn is partially to blame for me for perpetuating the idea that women are subordinates and that it's how rape is manifested, I also believe that can be corrected by teaching people that pornography is not a tutorial. It's not a how-to about sex. Pornography, because I'm not a person who really subscribes to mainstream pornography. I've done a lot of exploring more indie versions of pornography that are exploratory and more ethical, kumbaga. And the lesson that I learned from there is that pornography is supposed to be visually pleasing, but it's not supposed to be imitated. It's not supposed to be manifested. But of course, because mainstream pornography is so heteronormative, and again, it really portrays women as subordinate and it creates a lot of confusion about communication, the blame really is still there. So gusto ko lang po yun i-manifest. Next on the speakers list po is Elaine, I think. Elaine, if you're there, you can speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes po, we can hear you.
Okay. So, ipapagsama-sama ko lang yung mga sinabi ni Rainer, ni Aris, ni Ma'am, then you, Teddy. May binabasa kasi akong book right now. And has something to do with, with, yun nga, yung women as sexualizing themselves. Kasi, dun sa book na binabasa ko, the main character is, is a prostitute. Tapos, discuss niya dun na, bakit nga ba yung mga lalaki ma-accept doon sa prostitution, but yung mga babae pumapayag rin mag-being prostitute. So, ang mga binanggit is, once, makatulong sa family, 2, na-enjoy nila yung job, 3, yung mga lalaki naman kasi is, ang sabi doon is parang, they're not really, they're just, parang they're just having, like sex for like that, for prostitutes, yung mga ganon, something like that. They engage in those stuff para ma-alleviate sila sa mga problems nila in life, like yung stress nila sa office, yung stress nila sa family, someone to converse din. Kasi hindi man daw lahat sa prostitution is sex talaga. Then, yung kay Aris naman, yung regarding sa is yung prostitution ba or yung pagiging porn star ba is it consent or hindi? Actually, I've read yung biographies o yung mga interviews nung dalawang porn star. One is an ex-porn star and yung isa is current porn star. Yung sa ex-porn star, ang sinabi niya is, dati, ang dami niya daw trabaho, pero hindi niya daw na-enjoy yun eh. Lagi daw siya nabobore. So yung nag-try siya sa industry ng porn, dun siya naging masaya. Pero yun nga, at the expense of yung family niya, sinishame siya kasi Christian yung upholding ng family niya. If I'm not mistaken, yung dad nga is a pastor. Then siya, yun nga, naging porn star. So, sinishame siya ng family niya. Then, yung sa isa naman is bata pa lang siya, may gano'n na siya. I forgot the term for that. Pero yun, may gano'n siya. May din siya makapag-sexualize sa sarili niya. So, yun lang.
Thank you very much for speaking, Elaine. Next, does anybody want to respond to Elaine, by the way? If not, we can move on in the speakers list. Next is Kuya Jeko. Go ahead, Kuya Jeko.
Hello, malinaw ba?
Malinaw po.
Ayun, nasa same topic pa din naman ako. gusto ko lang muna i-emphasize yung connection ng current topic natin with the main topic natin, no, which is rape culture and feminism or feminist education, feminist philosophy. I think relevant ito sa mismong topic kasi of course we have that issue with regarding sa paninisi sa mga rape victims with how they look, no, na masyado silang sexy, ganon. Or for example, yung specific cases wherein actual sex workers are being raped, no? That cases exist na sex workers are being raped. So parang minsan nasisisi yung yung mga ganitong klaseng victims kasi with the way they look, with the way they kumbaga sexualize themselves, ganun. Na parang kasalanan nila kung bakit sila na-rape instead of yung rapist. So I think yun yung connection, no? Tapos ako, manggagaling pa din ako sa Marxist feminist na analysis. And siguro, nakikita ko kasi na parang common point of discussion natin and problem at this moment ay yung konsepto ng consent, yung konsepto, yung epistemic na yung parang pag-alam ba na kung totoo ba talagang choice natin, yung beliefs natin, kung totoo ba talagang choices natin, yung mga actions natin, ganun. So ako, parang in viewing this problem, bumabalik ako dun sa superstructure, substructure ni Marx na for him, the system creates our ideas, which of course our ideas are being translated into our actions. So basically, the capitalist and patriarchal system creates the ideas that we have, no, everything, including yung conception natin ng sexuality natin or at ng mga kababaihan. So I think tama at reflective yung sinasabi ko ngayon dun sa sinabi kanina ni Ma'am about ayun yung epistemic knowledge natin about sexuality. Kasi I think hindi talaga madali na ma-identify at ma-realize na na kung ano yung nalalaman natin ay talagang sarili nating ideas, no? And not to misinterpret it, no? And ayun, so basically parang mahirap talaga ma-realize na conditioned tayo in certain ways, no? Kasi nga, ayun, the system itself creates our ideas. So for me, despite that, I think despite na halimbawa, if ever na tama na yung mga ideas natin ay hindi natin talagang totoong ideas at hindi natin choice dahil sa kinondition lang tayo ng sistema, I think we still have the capability to know na ganun yung case, no? And gusto kong i-re-echo yung sinabi ni Ma'am na I think through experiences talaga yung lalabas. So yung sagot, no, kung paano natin ma-realize na hindi natin sariling ideas, hindi rin nating sariling choices yung ginagawa natin, ay through our experiences. Kasi parang babalik din ako dun sa common concept na our theories, no, our social theories are tested and are proven through practice. So ako, parang I would re-echo yung sinabi ni Ma'am na that women should really live their experiences, no? And from that experiences, they will know kung yung correctness at yung wrongness ng beliefs nila, yung theories nila, yung actions. Pero I would also agree with Teddy saying na living our experiences has something to do then with our privileges. No? Kasi tama yun na parang there are really people na they don't have a choice, no? And they don't have the choice to philosophize pa, no? To think of their concept, of their ideas, no? Kasi ang mas priority nila ay yung kakainin nila, yung pera nila, ganun. So kaya I think hindi enough yung for women to live their experiences and to tell their experiences. I think we must go beyond it And we must go to the very root pa din ng problem, which is the capitalist and patriarchal system. And that we need to end this system so that we can truly address and transform our problematic ideas and practices. Kasi nga, yung mga ideas and practices na to, nanggagaling din naman and produced din naman ng sistema na yon na hindi natin na-realize kasi conditioned yun sa atin ng sistema. So we can only really be free, I think, kapag nabago natin yung sistema at napalitan natin yung sistema. Ayun.
Can I answer to that?
Yes po, go ahead, ma'am.
Very good point of view, no, yung na-discuss ni Jeko. But I would also like to reiterate, no, ito yung isa sa mga tricky parts in theorizing, no? In theorizing and in making sense of our experiences, ang isang sphere kasi doon is our unconscious, no? We know and we are aware that we are socially conditioned and that we have patriarchal norms, patriarchal traditions, values that are so embedded, that are so ingrained in our moral and social fiber, no, that it is actually very impossible, no, or it's very difficult to pinpoint, no. So kaya nga tulad nga ng sinasabi ko, no, sa klase, noon nga nung ako ay BA Philo major pa lang noon, I was also oblivious doon sa mistake ko or doon sa hindi ko pagpansin na oo nga no, bakit parang puro lalaki yung mga thinkers na pinag-aaralan namin in philosophy. I mean, where are the women thinkers? Where are the women philosophers? No, I didn't realize that until I, of course, took the course, no, feminist philosophy. So it took me how many years? It took me siguro, ilang taon ba ako nung tinake ko yung FemPhilo? It took me 18 years to realize na majority of our thinkers are actually male, no? Na male dominated pala yung mga iba't ibang mga disiplina, itong mga enterprises na to. So I was very oblivious doon sa own error ko, no, sa own mistake ko, okay, of not noticing these things. So kaya nagiging importante lalo, no? Kasi marami tayong mga practices that even take years, no? It even takes years, decades to detect, no, that they are supportive pala, that they are rooted pala in patriarchal norms and traditions. That's why it has become important to note about contexts. Now, in that sense, yung mga experiences natin, yung mga lived experiences natin, as we try to tell these personal stories, as we try to make people know, no, the things, the experiences we endured, or how we make sense of our experiences, lalong nafo-focus yung kahalagahan ng contextual sensibility doon sa possibility natin kung saan mas nagkakaroon tayo ng self-awareness, mas naka-heighten yung self-awareness natin, no? Para makita natin yung so that we can see, no, kung paano nagiging mali, for example, yung views natin, kung paano nagiging mali yung views ng iba, in the sense na we can enlighten more about our own quite different contexts. In that sense, makikita natin na yung experiences ng iba, knowing their context, knowing the spatial, temporal backgrounds, no, kung saan dinederive nila yung meaning making nila in their experiences, makikita natin mas naka-heighten yung self-awareness natin na ito yung context ko ngayon, no? Dahil dun sa konteksto ng isang individual, okay, natutulungan din tayong mas maging self-aware doon sa konteksto na meron tayo right now. Okay? And in that sense, kung nakikita natin, for example, no, maganda rin yung usapin nung tanong kanina na bakit yung mga religious people, no, paano natin i-reconcile yung mga ganitong ito yung dogmatism, no, pagdating sa beliefs, no, sa Christian beliefs, etc. Makikita natin dito that these people, through context, through contextual sensibility, it heightens our awareness. It shows us, it demonstrates that they are wrong, for example, in interesting ways, that you are wrong in interesting ways. That helps us to develop, no, para mas matulungan tayong maka-develop ng mga arguments natin para makita natin yung contexts, okay, of the shibboleths, no, yung shibboleths of our time and contexts. So napaka tricky, no, ng pag-theorize kapag talagang ang involved, which is of course involved, is yung ating unconscious. Okay, so it may even take years or decades to detect these practices. But the good thing here is the way we narrate our lived experiences, the way we use our voices in making sense of our experiences, it helps us. No, it helps us to all the more be or all the more heighten our self-awareness of our context, of our own current contextual frames. Thank you.
Thank you po, ma'am. Before we move on with the speakers list, I would just like to read out a response from Atikai in the chat. So Atikai says, agree with Aris, no, we cannot rule out the fact that women are born into a patriarchal and capitalist society, and the subsequent choices women make are not totally in their autonomy, whether they are aware of it or not. Although I am all for women being comfortable with their sexuality, the concept of consent in partaking in these activities are still rooted in a patriarchal mentality, and the history of pornography as a commodity used to be something exclusive to the conversation of men. It is not the woman's fault, however, if they freely choose to be in this kind of industry and they are consequently shamed by society. The big picture necessitates a paradigm shift of mentality and solidarity with women in influencing change. So thank you for that very wonderful response, Atikai. We also have a question from the audience. The question is, are there some forms of pop culture that low-key or high-key reinforce slash promote rape culture? Would anybody like to respond to that question before we move on to speakers list po? Okay, so while nobody wants to respond for now to the question from the audience, let's move on with the speakers list. Ao, it's your turn to speak. Go ahead.
Okay po. So, hi, I'm Chris po from LPUC Senior High School. I have a question po. Is consensual non-consensual, which is a type of kink or a play of forced sex, a form of mockery or of rape? Or are kinks that still portray women as submissive in the bedroom a form of women embracing sexuality or just another standard of patriarchal sex?
Thank you for the question. I think that was our sister. Tama po ba? Does anybody want to respond to this question? Again, if I'll just repeat the question is consensual, non-consensual, parenthesis, play of forced sex, close parenthesis, a form of mockery of rape? Or are kinks that still portray women as submissive in the bedroom a form of women embracing sexuality or just another standard of patriarchal fetish? Does anybody want to respond to that? If nobody wants to respond to that, I think I have a response, but I'll be honest, my opinion is not that strong because I'm still thinking about it because that's a very interesting question. I think that I believe kasi that kink shaming is wrong. You know, people like what they like in the bedroom, and I don't find it useful to question or interrogate why they like what they like in the bedroom. If I don't know if it's a form of mockery of rape because it is meant to be a pleasurable experience. And also, as sinabi ni ma'am kanina, we have to be sensitive to the context. Because I think the way that it becomes a mockery of rape is if that's the intention of the people. I think. Though, I'm not sure with my answers because I'm still forming this opinion. And as for our kinks that still portray women as submissive in the bedroom, a form of women embracing sexuality or just another standard of patriarchal fetish, I think that this is another like sinabi din ni ma'am kanina, it's tricky to theorize about things that involve the subconscious. And this is something that involves the subconscious. Kasi nga, how will we know if that's really what a woman wants? If a woman really wants to be submissive in bed? What if they're just conditioned that way by society? Can we really know? So I don't know that there's really a sure answer to this question. It's just very, very tricky. So yun po yung response ko dun.
Okay,
Would
I would like
anyone
to
else
say
like...
something. Yeah.
Sige po, ma'am.
Actually, iniisip ko kung paano natin dapat i-approach yung mga ganitong tanong dahil sa complexity ng issue ng rape, for example, and ng ganito nga, ng issue ng kinks, ng play of forced sex. No, I would like to believe na it merits, it warrants another discourse, another avenue, platform para mas mapag-usapan kasi marami tayong hihimayin. Now we have a lot to unpack and we cannot just simplistically answer, categorically answer na yes or no because there are a lot of things, and discourses that surround, and at the same time andito yung interplay ng iba't ibang mga diskurso, socio-political discourses eh. So lalo yung usapin ng play of forced sex, no? So, maari din nating tignan halimbawa sa pornography yun, no? Kasi yun, madalas natin nakikita sa pornography. So, medyo nahihirapan akong magbigay ng categorical or ng very simple na sagot sa tanong because I believe it is not a very simple question and that it requires us to unpack a lot of things and to go into the specifics and details ng ganitong usapin, no? Tulad ng consensual, non-consensual, or a play of forced sex, and at the same time yung issue ng kinks that still portray women as submissive in the bedroom. Nahahati pa rin sa dalawang kampo lagi ang mga feminists, no, pagdating sa mga ganitong usapin. Dito yung mga feminists na naniniwala na tulad nung sinasabi natin kanina, naniniwala na hindi nagiging maganda yung epekto ng pornography. Okay, kumbaga nagiging theory yung pornography, nagiging practice yung rape. So nagiging ganun yung influence niya, yung effect niya, okay, sa individuals. So they believe na dapat ma-eradicate yun totally. And that hindi sila, they don't buy it, no, na talaga namang women, no, are really consenting doon sa klase ng profession or ng trabaho na iyon, no, or ng career na iyon. At they are just blinded siguro by different social and cultural factors that shape their choices, no? That eventually led them to choose to be a porn star, to be a prostitute, for example. So, andito rin naman yung kampo ng mga feminists na naniniwala naniniwala sa rationality. Okay? Kasi dito papasok yung usapin that, well, women, for the longest time, no, nadudoon yung kasama sa oppression ng mga kababaihan ang inferiority, no, at the same time yung hindi pag-attribute sa atin ng epistemic authority or tayo ay tinitignan na hindi nagpo-possess ng rationality. Okay, yung reason, no? So may mga feminists na naniniwala o malakas ng argumento nila, no, na ginagamit nila ang rationality. So they are saying that women are rational beings, no? In that sense, they are capable, no, to reason, capable silang i-interrogate yung mga issues na kinakaharap nila, and so they are also capable in deciding, capable in choosing these things, no? So may ganong argumento na, well, after all, women are rational beings. So if they deem it fit na they think it's best for them to pursue this career, they think this is their choice, no? They think that these choices, this context will lead them to this type of career, type of profession, for example, and then okay. Now, if women, for example, thinks that this will all the more make them confident when it comes to their sexuality, then okay, because we believe that women are rational beings. We believe in their capacity for reason, no? So ganun, no, ganun pwede nating tignan, no, sa very little, very minimum na information and details na meron tayo dito sa mga issues na ganito.
Thank you po for the response, ma'am. If nobody else wants to respond to this topic, I think we can move on with the speakers list po. So last call, does anybody want to respond to the current topic? Okay, if none, we can move on with the speakers list po. Next on the speakers list is Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan.
Ayun, hello po. Actually, kanina po natin naririnig yung about sa pornography as being somehow is if tama ko is discourage po natin kasi it is parang nape-perpetuate nito yung pagiging submissive or pagiging yung oppression ng patriarchal society sa women. I just want to parang manifest yung or parang to parang kumuha ng attention din sa body about what is your kung ano yung point niyo about sa pag-exist ng feminist sex worker organizations. Like sinasabi nila na hindi naman talaga parang actually it is against sa kay sinasabi ni Ma'am na kay McKinnon kanina na sinasabi nila na it is not necessarily mean na yung sex work is na undermine yung respect and dignity ng women, but because yung reason why they are being oppressed is that yung kawalan ng equality ng law. Ibig sabihin, yung sex work, yung pornography, and yung prostitution is that we should create laws. For example, we should create a safe space for these women, for this let's say porn stars and prostitutes. Kasi it is actually the basic parang kasama ng capitalism, it is actually yung law which should cater para sa equality ng women in the workplace, sa school, or sa any work. So ayun. So I just want to parang play the devil's advocate dun sa sinasabi ni yun dun sa sinabi rin ni Ma'am about dun sa pornography na it actually creates further oppression ng women. Yun po.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Does anybody want to respond to what Ryan said? If you are, just say so in the chat or raise your hand. If wala pong gustong mag-respond kay Ryan, we have a question po in the chat from, if I'm not
question. Sorry. A question ba
Ryan po.
specifically to Ryan?
Ryan, did you have a question?
I just want to makuha po yung point ni Ma'am or ng yung anyone's audience about sa existence ng feminist worker organizations na they believe po na kasi na it does not necessarily mean na kapag nasa porn industry ka or nasa porn industry ka or nag-work as a prostitute is na undermine na yung respect, parang nawalan ka ng respect sa'yo or parang na-oppress ka na at yung dignity mo is nawawala, but it is the law po na we should actually create para sa safe space ng women dito sa mga working na
Okay.
Okay. Maganda na may ganitong initiatives to support women working in this industry. Napakalaki ng role ng law, of course, ng legal aspect pagdating sa pag-regulate, pagdating sa pagprotekta sa mga women workers na ito. So, babalik pa rin tayo doon sa kung paano nasi-shape ng society natin yung or paano nasi-shape ng institutions ng social context natin, yung mga pagtingin din natin, yung mga trabaho natin, for example. But I think we should not lose sight doon sa active participation natin, that we can negotiate constraints, that we are empowered to change the conversation, and that we can shape, or we have a shaping effect on how our social context is defined, is explained, and rationalized, and organized. So I think it will apply then sa iba't iba pang issues concerning women and other marginalized communities or groups, no, that siguro lagi maganda na i-interrogate natin yung ganitong issues, pero nandoon din yung recognition that we should always make a space for resistance. We should always recognize our active participation sa pag-organize, sa pag-challenge, or sa pag-rationalize, pag-explain ng mga issues na ito. Okay? Na apart from saying that, okay, ingrained talaga sa moral and social fiber natin yung mga issues na ito, very embedded talaga siya sa society. Pero we should always remember our participation. No, we should always remember that we are empowered, and we can become active participants in negotiating these constraints.
Thank you po, ma'am, for that response. We have, I think, a question from the chat po, from Jimena, from Gabriela Yus, UPLB. Jimena says, hindi po ba ang konteksto ng choice pagdating sa usapin ng prostitusyon ay malabo hanggang sa ngayon dahil hindi naman lahat ng tao ay may equal chance para maka-access sa resources na mayroon tayo sa bansa? So, yun po yung kanyang question. Would anybody like to respond to Jimena's question? The floor is open as usual. If you would like to, if the question wasn't clear, you can always read it again as a chat po.
Yeah, I think na kumbaga napasadahan na rin natin yung pagiging unstable siguro, no, ng yung pagdating sa stability ng consent, no, bilang refuge natin, no, in tackling these issues, kasi babalik at babalik tayo doon sa recognition o pag-acknowledge natin that women's sexuality, no, for the longest time ay shaped by the patriarchal society, and so we are not really free, no. Kaya nga Simone de Beauvoir, no, in existentialist feminism, for example, ini-aim natin yung transcendence, yung sarili nating freedom to make sense of our own experiences, no, kasi if we continue, okay, yung tradition of men interpreting or experiencing the world for us, okay, at hindi nare-recognize yung differences and yung pagiging unique ng experiences ng bawat isa, okay, nagiging malabo, no, yung pagtingin natin sa mga ganitong issues. So I think yung tama no, na pag-uusapan natin kanina yung pagiging unstable ng konteksto ng choice, okay, doon sa usapin ng prostitution. So choice ba talaga to? Autonomy ba talaga? Na-express ba talaga yung autonomy, bodily integrity, and the right of the individual to consent, the right to choose, the right to one's body, okay? Or tulad ng mga radical feminists, ito rin ba ay driven, no, ng iba't iba pang socio-cultural na mga factors, no, that we are in an illusion, no, of thinking that we have the choice, okay, when in fact wala naman talaga, no. So I stand corrected na dun sa una kong statement, no. Ang nasabi ko yata is consent, no. So it was choice, no. So I think it stands, no, that in this sense shaped siya by the different contexts and socio-political and cultural discourses or historical context of that time.
Thank you po, ma'am. Does anybody have a response to what ma'am just said? If wala po, I think next on the speakers list is supposed to be Larisse. She raised her hand. Larisse, would you still like to speak po?
Sinulat ko na lang po yung, I mean, tinay po yung question ko kasi tulog na yung
Oh,
mga tao.
I see, I see. Would you like me to read it out po?
Yes po. Magta-type na lang
Sige,
po.
Sige po, I'll read it out for you na lang. So Larisse says, saw this in Pepito Manaloto when Baby, a woman who is portrayed as unappealing in the show, was in a sketchy place. She was scared to be sexually harassed or raped. The response was that, quote, she was dreaming, parenthesis, that she would be raped, close parenthesis, unquote. I took this as the show enforcing the idea that women who are less appealing does not get raped or that a woman quote unquote dreams of being raped. So yeah, this and rape jokes, which was supposed to be a response to what Atikai said. Does anybody have a response to what Larisse said?
I think that was the
Oh,
response to the question from the audience about pop culture. Tama ba? Na that reinforce or promote rape culture?
I think so po. Oh, she has follow-up questions po. Okay, I think somebody in the audience has a response. Andre, would you like to respond?
Yeah, if in the topic pa rin is yung sa pop culture, low-key or high-key reinforcing rape culture, if it's alright.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Yeah, isang naisip ko kasi kanina nung na-post yung question is one particular scene from the movie Twilight. Um, there was a scene there na si Edward ay pinapanood si Bella, which is yung babae, na natutulog without her knowing na pinapanood siya ni Edward. No? Tapos, nung unang beses ko napanood yung movie, kinikilig ako na syempre bata pa ako noon. And then, I rewatched it again this year. And then, I realized, hindi naman siya binigyan ng consent ni Bella na panoorin siyang natutulog. And if we put it in context, ang creepy niyang tingnan. And para siyang stalker ang labas nun. And I think na hindi lahat or kaunti lang yung nagpo-point out ng ganun. And ang labas nun is parang kinikilig pa yung mga tao sa ganong klase ng mga acts which is not really true or which is not really correct. No? So I think that's one example of pop culture enforcing sexual rape culture.
Okay, does anybody want to respond to Andre po?
Yeah, marami actually mga media no or forms ng pop culture no na nagpapakita no, whether high key or low key no ng mga ganito no. So we can go back to our discussion a while ago about the rape supportive attitudes that give way for the proliferation of rape culture. No? So long as these rape supportive attitudes ay nanonormalize no, at hindi napoportray siguro or nare-represent properly accordingly or properly or accordingly, siguro doon mas nakikita natin yung effect mismo nung medium, no, the way it conveys its message to the audience. So I think a lot of you could also cite one or two media or siguro forms ng pop culture that reinforce or promote rape culture.
Thank you po for the response, ma'am. So I would just like to announce that we are almost coming to an end with our philosophical discussion because it is getting late and we are reaching our time limit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna exhaust all the remaining questions, and then afterwards we're gonna ask the audience and of course ma'am for their final statements, their learnings, and basically the final words after we exhaust all of the questions. So tech team, what's our next question? Okay, so apparently the next questions are the follow-up questions from Laurice. First question: when a couple is having sex and one person says no, stop midway of the act, and the other person continues despite this, is it rape? I have an immediate response to this. My response is yes, it is definitely rape because I subscribe to the belief that consent can always be revoked. Because sometimes things happen when you're having sex. Things become uncomfortable. Things could become painful because something went wrong. So there always has to be room to stop midway. And if a person continues once the consent has been revoked, I mean, I'm a liberal feminist, so I follow the definition that if there was intercourse but no consent and it's rape, then for me, yes, it's definitely rape. Does anybody else have a response to that question po?
Yeah, so long as no invasive. Okay, kasi our body is a site of different. Our body is active and passive, no, in a lot of ways. Okay, kaya nagiging site siya ng mga diskurso, no. Kaya nga importante that feminists are putting forth, no, yung argument about the embodied subject, no. So sa ganito, babalik ulit tayo dun sa issue ng consent, which is, again, no, paano ba natin dapat intindihin yung consent kapag ba nag-consent ka sa isang bagay, no? At maiiba siya, halimbawa yung activity, kailangan pa bang ibigay mo pa yung consent mo doon? Continuous ba siya? Paano ba siya nag-work, for example, or as part kind of communication when it comes to sex, for example. So, no, so long as it's invasive, okay, to the embodied subject. Okay, I also believe na makikita natin doon if, or we can determine if it is rape. Yeah. So I think meron pa siyang isang question. I don't know if you have seen or you have noticed Eric's question. Meron pa sa taas.
Opo, Eric's question is the last question po for the discussion.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Meron pong response from the tech team to actually it's more of a follow-up question about the when a couple is having sex and one person says no question. Our tech team, Zai, is asking, what if the couple has a safe word and the safe word wasn't used? Is it still rape? I also have an immediate response to this. I think that if the mistake of the person who wanted the intercourse to stop was not using the safe word, I think it's still rape because it's still invasive. The fact that the person who wanted, let's say, for example, the woman wanted to stop having sex because something went wrong and she forgot to use the safe word that she had agreed upon with her partner, it doesn't change the fact that she was still violated because something is happening to her without her consent. But I think that it also changes some accountability. Like, it makes the question of whose fault is it more complicated. I really don't have an answer to it. I just know that even if the person didn't use the safe word and they kept going, I still believe it to be rape. Does anybody else have a response to that follow-up question, po?
Well, if the person is in the right uh, mental and emotional, for example, position to categorically say yes or no, okay? I think wala na akong ibang nakikitang problem doon. No? So, kung sinabi niyang hindi, pag tinuloy pa rin, then that I think would violate, no, yung wish or yung kagustuhan ng isang party. Kaya mas nagiging komplikado yung ganitong issue is because of the relationship, okay, nung mga involved. Okay, kaya nga ito yung isang sinasabi natin kanina, that something that adds to the complexity is that there is a widely perception na, well, rape naman happens, or rape is for is done or is being done by people na hindi mo kakilala, etc. No, that you don't share any mutuality with, etc. But nagiging komplikado lalo yung usapin, no? Kasi merong relationships na involved, and in this sense, maari lang din na i-argue nito na couple naman tayo, magjowa naman tayo. So I think walang problema doon, etc. No? So nabublur, no? Nabublur yung autonomy, nabublur din yung nabublur yung autonomy mismo, okay, nung other party. Kaya if you can see, no, there are also clamors to change and reform yung rape mismo, rape law natin mismo sa Pilipinas, because there is if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, no, pero I remember that there's a parang meron yatang provision on the absolution nung crime kapag, for example, kinasal sila. So halimbawa, yung nang rape, so halimbawa nabuntis, or kung hindi man, and then pwede siyang ma-absolve through forgiveness and through marriage. No? So, no? Kaya very complicated lalo. No? It adds to the complexity of the issue. And there are still a lot of things that we need to unpack. No? Dami pa rin pwedeng himayin dito sa issue na to.
Thank you po for the response, ma'am. Laurice, you raised your hand. Oh, okay, you're going to respond to the current topic. Go ahead and speak po.
Yun lang po. Gusto ko lang po point out na sa topic of consent, I think that women's ability to say no are very invalidated, and to the point na they're using it as parang argument that their no have lacks substance or has no meaning, or that their no means maybe. Na ang napansin ko po kasi is like, if a man says no, then we immediately accept his decision that he doesn't want to do something. Pero if a woman does it, parang naging kasama na rin sa pop culture na if a girl says no, or if a woman says no, she's actually saying yes. Kailangan mo lang pilitin, ganyan. So yeah, I think in the topic of consent, it's also important to stress that women's ability to say no are invalidated and should be empowered. Kasi even, lalo na sa mga bata, palaging pinapasunod na lang sila. Even at that young age, parang tinuturo na agad na your ability to say no means nothing. And we should empower women to say no more, because we are not secondary citizens or people. We are as equal to men. That's what I believe.
Thank you very much for that response, Laurice. And I would just like to say that I agree with you very much. Laurice also has another question in the chat. If nobody wants to respond to that, okay, we will move on to the next question. This is a question directed to Ryan. The question is, if we create the safe space, does this eliminate the question whether women chose to do sex work or were they conditioned to do so? So Ryan, you've been called out. Would you like to
Actually, tama
respond?
na. Loris. Hi, Loris. It actually doesn't eliminate kasi yun talaga yung root cause, yung pag-condition sa mga yung conditioning na nangyayari sa sistema. But what I'm actually saying is that yung ano yung magagawa natin sa status quo, yung ano yung mag-create ng yung pag-create natin ng laws to provide for them a safe space. To answer your question, is doesn't actually eradicate yung main cause, which is yung yung oppression ng women dahil sa patriarchy, dahil sa social conditioning, but what can we actually create para mawala or para ma-eradicate yung tuloy-tuloy na oppression ng women in the porn industry or in prostitution. Ayun. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Ryan. Does anybody else want to respond to the current topic at hand? Oh, Louise, your hand is still raised. Do you still want to say something, or did you just forget to lower your hand? Oh, she lowered her hand. Would you like to say something pa po? Or okay na? Okay na, okay. So we are going to move on to the last question of our philosophical discussion tonight from Kuya Eric. The question is, paano ika-clarify yung misconception na rape culture does not exist? Kasi to claim that something exists culturally is to say that it exists through social behavior, customs, and ideals. The argument is kasi yung culture natin di naman sineselebrate ang rape. So to say that there is a culture of rape is incorrect. We don't proliferate rape, we condemn people who do. I feel like this is a matter of semantics. I don't know. That's just my initial reaction. Does anybody want to respond to that? Because that seems pretty loaded.
Anyone can answer and then I'll go next. Or kung wala,
Sige
I can
po.
start.
Sige po, ma'am. You can go ahead and start po. I think people are still formulating their answers.
Yeah. Hi, Eric. Congratulations. On your graduation. Tama? Kasi nakasabay ka na eh. Actually, na-recognize ko yung line of thinking mo. Being my student for how many semesters, no? Recognize ko kagad yung line of thinking mo and the sharpness in it, no? Actually, tama naman at some point si Teddy, no? Pwedeng issue rin siya ng semantics. Pero ang sinasabi kasi natin dito is, you're saying that to claim that something exists culturally is to say that it exists through social behavior, customs, and ideals. Okay? Kanina we try to look at a definition of rape culture. No, so ang mention ko sa discussion is that we don't focus on the specific people or the perpetrators per se, but we look at the practice. We look at the culture it is creating, and this involves rape culture involves, no, hindi lang doon sa pag-normalize, no, ng violation or sexual violation to women and other individuals. Ito I would like to believe, no, that it involves even catcalling, rape jokes, no. So ang una ko siguro magiging answer is maraming evidence that nag-e-exist siya, no, through social behavior, custom, and ideals. Sa mga rape jokes pa lang, that is part of the rape culture. Sa mga catcalling pa lang, street catcalling, no, etc. Nag-e-exist yung rape culture, no? So napoproliferate lalo. Di ba? Punta ka na lang sa comment section, for example, in Facebook or on Facebook, makikita natin sana ma-rape ka sana, may mga ganung mga tirada na ganun lang nila mini-mention, sinasabi, no? So ako ang nakikita ko nag-e-exist siya doon sa konteksto natin ngayon at mas napoproliferate lalo, for example, ng mga taong influential, okay, ng mga taong malaki ang influence or malaki yung position, for example, sa gobyerno. So, sa ganito pa lang, makikita natin na nag-e-exist yung rape culture. Kasi nakikita natin siya sa iba't ibang forma, okay, sa iba't ibang mga behavior, sa iba't ibang mga practices. So, doon naman sa last sentence mo that we don't proliferate rape, okay, that we condemn people who do. I remember one of my discussions in our FemPhilo, makikita natin to sa pag-approach natin tungkol sa mga misogynist and sexist. When we say that someone is misogynist, ang dali for us to say that, you're a misogynist. And so, for example, iiwasan kita, I will not talk to you, or that or I'll try to educate you, no, or you will brand someone, tag someone as a misogynist, no? And at the same time, ganun din sa issue ng sexism. We look at sexism or people na nag-exhibit ng ganito as just sexists. And we stop there. We stop tagging them as sexist. Ayoko makipag-usap siya, sexist yan. Okay? Etc. No? Pero we don't see the bigger, the macro scale, no, ng ganitong approach, that we shouldn't just look at the perpetrators. We shouldn't just look at the people, no, at these people who commit these things, no? Kasi kung hanggang doon lang tayo to tag them as sexist, to tag them as misogynist, what did we accomplish? So to look at it on macro level, maganda siguro makita natin that sexism and misogynist or misogyny, sorry, that sexism and misogyny are actually branches sa ng patriarchal order, ng patriarchal ideology, no? Property siya ng social system, no? That someone is misogyny kasi meron siyang idea, meron siyang psychological disposition that he hates, for example, women, okay? Pero pag natag na natin siya as misogynist, and then that's it. No, I mean we really don't accomplish anything. But when we look at the concepts, okay, the phenomenon of misogyny, or in that case sexism, makikita natin that these are actually branches of the patriarchal order. Yung sexism, well, meron silang erroneous belief about women, okay, kaya nagko-commit sila ng mga sexist jokes, assumptions, remarks, etc. No? Pero we have to look at sexism. Paano ba siya nag-work in the patriarchal order? It rationalizes or it justifies patriarchal social relations. Nadja-justify yung sexism kasi property siya ng social system. At the same time, ganun din sa misogyny, property siya ng social system na all the more mas nag-e-enforce, no? Mas nag-uphold ng mga systems natin in a patriarchal society, no? So that's it, no? Doon ko nakikita, no, yung siguro yung disagreement natin doon sa question mo. Okay, so lagi titignan natin siya as properties of the patriarchal order. No, we hindi natin sinasabi na i-absueltuhin natin o na hindi na natin o napababayaan natin yung mga nagko-commit ng mga ganung bagay, pero titignan natin yung mas malawak, no? Mas we'll look at the macro scale, no? How should sexism, how does it operate, or misogyny, how does it operate on a broader context, right? Or in a broader social context. So I think ganun din pagdating sa rape culture.
Thank you po, ma'am, for that response. May response ka ba to that, Eric?
Hello, everyone. I think kaya ako rin raise yung question kasi I had this discussion with a friend na he argues na rape culture does not exist. And the way na in-explain ni ma'am na it does exist, ganun din yung paano ko siya respond in that manner. It actually exists in society na people actually engage in such yung mga ganitong behavior na rape jokes, tas mga misogynistic behavior, yung mga homophobic behavior na parang ito mas tinitignan nila as laughing matter lang yung mga ganitong bagay, as something na katawa-tawa lang siya, which is mali nga yun in the first place. And I think siguro nung na-explain ko na mali yung ganung line of thinking na hindi naman na sinasabi niya na rape culture does not exist. I think through explaining to him na it does exist, nung after ko nakulin yung femfilo under Ma'am Maria, mas na-enlighten pa siya, mas na-enlighten naman na siguro siya nun. So, yun lang. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Eric. I have a short response to that. Yung question na paano ika-clarify yung misconception that rape culture does not exist. I think the main key to helping somebody to realize that rape culture does indeed exist is to paint a picture of what rape culture looks like. Be very specific with them. Like, ayun nga, give them examples like rape culture exists in rape jokes, rape culture exists in victim blaming, rape culture exists in slut shaming. And what do these things look like? You have to tell them what it is at the most specific, most pragmatic level so that they'll understand that if they just look around, they will see all of the things that you are describing in theory. So that, of course, is a very simplistic response, and persuading people who think that rape culture does not exist is not actually that simple. But I think that's the very core of convincing somebody, of making them realize that rape culture is something that is prevalent in our society. So does anybody have any other responses po to Eric's question? Okay, we have two people who want to respond. First to raise their hand was Louise. Go ahead.
So, may question po ako na I don't know if related, pero parang yung negation po siya ng, parang katulad po siya ng negation na rape culture doesn't exist. Yung pagsasabi po ng, katulad po nung issue nung kay Tulfo, when he said that he's not victim blaming, when he said na iha dapat ganito ganyan, he was just saying daw na parang tinuturuan lang na kung ano yung like, paano po natin ma-explain sa mga ganitong tao na they are actually proliferating victim blaming rather than trying to save or protect. Yan po.
Thank you for that question, Larise. Wow, that's a really interesting and loaded question. Does anybody have a response? That will be our last question of the night po. Okay, I think Kuya Jeko has a response. Go ahead, Kuya Jeko.
Hello, narinig ba?
Opo, rinig po.
Sige. Isasabay ko na siguro yung sagot ko kay Loris doon sa pinaka siguro natutunan ko din or last words ko for tonight, final statement ko. I think yung kay Loris, it has really to do something talaga with the importance of feminist philosophy, feminist writing, and feminist teaching to combat rape culture and to combat patriarchy as a whole. And which gives me to my final statement for tonight. I think what every ideas that I learned and I heard tonight affirms my belief that the two-headed beast of capitalist patriarchy exists, and that this system creates problematic ideas, beliefs, subconscious and practices that we have right now. And dahil yon sa central to this system ay yung concept of exploitation or necessity of exploitation of humans and dehumanization of humans. And these wrong and problematic ideas and subconscious create problems such as rape culture. So with that, I think feminist teaching and philosophy is important in addressing rape culture, because through feminist teaching, we will realize that there is a problem and we will unmask the face of the source of that problem, which is for me, capitalist patriarchy. Also, through feminist teaching and philosophy, the experiences of women can be surfaced or can be highlighted so that we can free ourselves from the narratives and ideas that were created and forced by men to women, to every one of us. So it's more of like going back to the dialectical materialism of Marx. Kumbaga, through feminist philosophy, writing, and ideas, we will contradict yung problematic na status quo natin. No? Yung problematic na ideas that we have, which are patriarchal and capitalist in nature. So, pero with this contradiction, no, in our ideas and knowing what is right and wrong, I think knowing is never enough, just like what Mom said kanina. And just like kung ano yung essence ng feminism, which is, aside from it is a theory, also a practice. So kaya kung sagot dun kay Ryan kanina, even creating laws that will safeguard these women is never enough, no? And that's why I also don't agree with liberal feminists na enough na sa kanila yung civil rights. Kasi these laws that will be created and rights that will be created does not end the system. It's still part of the system. So we must always realize, sa gaya nga ng sabi ni ma'am, that our participation is really important. Now we have to realize that we have the capacity to end and to change the system. That there is an alternative and we have to act to have it. So basically, ang pinaka-thought ko is that we have a status quo of ideas that are problematic. We allow these women to share their ideas, to share their experiences, so that this status quo of problematic ideas will be exposed, or their problems will be exposed, so that we can arrive at a feminist theory. Pero syempre, when we have the feminist theory, we have to put it in practice. So ayun.
Thank you, Kuya Jeko, for your final words. Does anybody else have final words that they'd like to share?
Can I answer muna dun sa last question natin?
Oh, go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah. So, totoo, no, na loaded siya, tricky din siya kung paano sagutin. Pero, kaya malaki ang kumpiyansa ko, no, malaki ang belief ko. Actually, it's very pragmatic, no, na pagtingin that institutions, albeit being embodied habits, no, that at the outset it's very hard to change, no, it's impervious to change, no. We can always look at these institutions as complexes of habit, no. We need to recognize, no, that tama yung mga sinabi ni Jeko, no, that malaki yung role ng education dito, no. That's why actually I actually pursued my master's thesis, no, in transforming education, but I'm using feminist pragmatism, no, in arguing for a feminist pragmatist education, because of course the cumulative experiences, no, that I had, no, of becoming a woman and becoming of being a woman and being an educator. So I was also convinced that no formal schooling, even formal schooling, cannot educate you, no, sa mga usapin na ito. And there is no amount of education that we have right now to prepare us for the trauma, for the prohibition, and at the same time for the anxieties, okay, na mararanasan natin when we are faced with these violences, okay, specifically rape and sexual violence. That's why napakagandang location ng education as an institution, wherein halos majority of our lives are actually spent in the school. So napakalaki ng possibility, napakalaki ng chance of that specific institution to change our beliefs, to help us learn, relearn and unlearn different knowledge and different practices. So that's why we also need to consider the possibility of exhaustion. No, kaya halimbawa sa mga tulad, halimbawa Manuel Tulfo, or yung mga tao na talagang sarado, na okay, it's also not a very conducive task to encourage people to join, for example, a specific movement, to rally for a specific movement. But we also have to recognize exhaustion, no? May possibility of saturation and exhaustion even in our movements. So, para ma-address siguro yon, we also need to, or pragmatically siguro, na makita na kaya mas nag-i-invest tayo doon sa educational institutions natin kasi mas nandoon yung flexibility. Okay? Yung mas nahuhon doon yung flexibility ng mga individuals to unlearn these habits, no, para mag-revise, no, to be open to revision, no, in light of new experiences, in light of new knowledge, etc. So kaya even if we say, no, na it's a very hard task to change institutions, specifically, even our educational institutions, they are still complex as habits that can be redirected, no, that can be redirected intelligently. So yeah, no, that's it.
Thank you po, Ma'am Taganas, for that response to the question. Does anybody else have final thoughts that they want to share? Maybe things that you learned, what you liked, what you expect from the next Omilia episode, anything. If not, would it be okay to ask Ma'am Marga for her final thoughts to end the discussion po? Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Teddy. Actually, I'm a bit overwhelmed, no? And at the same time, I'm so glad to be with you guys tonight. No, umabot tayo from 30 plus kanina, so biglang 17 na lang tayo. And look at the time, it's already 11:30. No? So it's, hindi ko rin namalayan yung time. At the same time, I was enjoying, and I was just so glad to listen to your insights, to listen to your stories. Okay, and I'm very impressed by the enthusiasm that each and every one of you, no, that you have showed tonight. You have a very sharp thinking. At the same time, ang gaganda ng mga points, no? Very challenging questions and points of views. No, I'm just, of course, thankful, no, that you have invited me tonight and that I had this chance to partake my knowledge and to take part, no, in becoming or in addressing and in philosophizing in this very relevant issue. So I'm just encouraging all of you to continue to challenge, continue to ask questions, and still continue to be open in a sense that we are also context sensitive, no? That we practice contextual sensibility in philosophizing and in interrogating these issues. So thank you so much, everyone, especially Philosoph, for inviting me. And thank you everyone who stayed, no, up until this hour to listen to everyone and to all your insights. No? Sobrang thank you so much. And I still hope to see you again. So if you still have some questions or mga gusto pa kayong i-clarify, you can always message me. My communication lines are always open for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you po, Ma'am Marga. On behalf of Philosoph and also the entire audience, we would like to thank you so much for your presence and for all of the intelligence and the knowledge and the wisdom that you just offered us. With this, we would also like to thank the 8 viewers that we have on our Facebook Live. Thank you for staying with us until this hour. We really appreciate it. So, Zai, Tech Team, can you please enable my screen sharing so that we can present the certificates of appreciation? Okay, so the last part of our program, of course, is to present our certificates for our speakers and our partner organizations. Okay, kita po ba lang lahat yung screen ko? Okay, so we would like this certificate is hereby given to Ms. Krisa Margat Taganas for actively imparting her knowledge and expertise in feminist philosophy during the 5th installation of the Philosophical Society of UPLB's Omilia series entitled Rape Culture and Feminist Philosophy, awarded this 11th of July 2020. So thank you very much, Ms. Marga. Next certificate is for one of our partner organizations. This certificate is hereby given to Gabriela Youth UPLB in recognition of their invaluable contribution for the success of the Philosophical Society of UPLB's 5th installation of Omilia series entitled Rape Culture and Feminist Philosophy, awarded this 11th of July 2020. And lastly, but of course not the least, for our last partner organization, this certificate is hereby given to PUP Soquietos Philosophiae in recognition of their invaluable contribution for the success of the Philosophical Society of UPLB's fifth installation of Omilia series entitled Rape Culture and Feminist Philosophy, awarded this 11th of July 2020. So, yun lang po. I think that is almost the end of our program. Again, follow us, subscribe to our channel, like our page for more info, and thank you so much to everybody who participated, and we hope to see you again on the next episode of Omilia. Have a good night, everybody.